You better be listening to Sleazoids or I must break you.
This is Dr. Zira, her loving husband Cornelius, and little Milo. The most dangerous to man is little Milo. Why? The time is 1973. The place is right here on Earth. How did they get here? What is their reception? Welcome, gentlemen, to the United States. Escape from the Planet of the Apes. The biggest, the newest, the most exciting of all the Planet of the Apes pictures. Climaxed by the spectacular revolt of the apes. The most awesome, the most horrifying spectacle in the annals of science fiction.
Hey everyone, welcome back to another episode of Sleazoids, the podcast where we go down the rabbit hole of 20th century genre fare from the most influential canon classics to the trashiest exploitation films we can get our hands on. Invite you to tag along in helping us create a canon of sleaze. Each week is a double feature, Grindhouse style, where we discuss two films loosely related by subject, genre, actor, filmmaker, or franchise. And at the end of each episode, along with our honorary Sleazoids, which you can become by subscribing on Patreon.
Get the squad together because we are going warrior mode next week. Join that sleaze.
Very true. We decide on all the official ratings and rankings for every film that we cover as well. Patreon subscribers also get an on-air shout-out and 2 bonus episodes every single month, which we've been doing for 6 years. There's like 140, 150 plus bonus episodes, as well as our bonus transmission series, which there's like 50 plus of, where we talk about new release genre films. And we have a lot of episodes we're doing coming up that are tied into new releases. So you might want to hear our thoughts on those. Patreon.com/Sleazoids podcast for anyone interested in that. And speaking of which, we did have a bunch of people make the jump this week. We had Jake sign up at $5 a month. We had Andrew M sign up. We had Tom Golden. We had Luxa. We had Gabriel Gaboni. We had Nicholas Austin, Jeff Rasmussen, Dan McEwen, Garrett Allen, Michael B, Tucker, Michael O'Leary, Jess Newhauser, Sean McGrath, Uberland Gizbar, Max, Jacob Ray Ramirez, Ryan Hoyt, Nolan Roberts, Talu, Matthew Price, Will, another Jake, Louis Adams, and last but not least, Rick Hurd. So thanks so much to you folks. Hope you're enjoying all those bonus episodes, and we appreciate the support.
Yeah, thank you very much, guys.
That's the one plug for the week. The other plug, as always, is Apple Podcasts and Spotify. If you were listening to us on either one of those platforms and you haven't given us a good old rating and review over the yet, please do so. It helps us climb the ranks and find new listeners, and we appreciate that support as well. And the very last plug, as always, is merch. If you like the poster art that based out of Toronto horror artist Trevor Henderson did for our show, you can get that put on basically anything that you can think of. And you guys have bought notebooks, pillows, hoodies, coffee mugs. If you are interested in that, the link is in the description of this episode, as well as over at sleazoidspodcast.com. But that is it for the intro. Welcome back to another week. As always, I am your host, Josh Lewis, and joining me also, as always, my co-host,
Jamie Miller. Welcome back, everybody.
Welcome. I believe 2 weeks ago would have been the last time you folks over on the main feed would have heard from us, and we would have had a very special guest filmmaker on the show, Mr. Charles Pinion, the director behind the scuzzy and psychedelic shot-on-video art horror films that we've covered on this show, including Red Spirit Lake, Twisted Issues, and We Await. If you have not seen Charles Pinion's films and not listened to those episodes, please go back and do so. They are fantastic, and we could not believe that he wanted to come on our show and talk to us. And when we invited him, we were like, dude, you make super nasty, gory movies made with your friends. What do you want to talk about? And he was like, I want to talk about 2 surreal musical fantasy films that I grew up with that really informed his directing style. And so the episode where we talked with him 2 weeks ago, we talked about Roy Rowland's Dr. Seuss scripted take on like a dark post-war, like Wizard of Oz style Technicolor children's musical, essentially, called The 5,000 Fingers of Dr. T from 1953, which is a spectacular movie that I had no idea existed. And Charles Pinion had a great story about how he watched it once when he was like 10 years old, and he thought that it was like a trippy nightmare that he had until he found it again in college and was like, wow, that was a real movie. I thought I I hallucinated that movie. And you totally understand why a kid in the 1950s might do that. And then we paired it with this infamous cult trash filmmaker, Ray Dennis Steckler, which was maybe more fitting to what you would expect that Charles would have brought, which was a no-budget filmmaker who made the first quote-unquote monster musical, basically just with him and his friends riding around a Long Beach amusement park called... I'm going to take a deep breath. The incredibly strange creatures who stopped living and became mixed up zombies, which is I think is the record for longest title brought on this show, because I literally could not fit it into the
the
episode title length.
It's like you're locked in a room and only I have the key. Your Vice is a locked room and only I have the key. Something like that.
That's what it is. Yeah. Incredible title too.
Awesome. Yeah. Great. But and don't mean to brag, but we're friends with Charles Pinion on Facebook now. So I'm just saying.
It's true.
I'm just saying.
That's right. He's posting about all the movies he's watching.
He's taking photos. I'm just saying,
Yeah, we're talking to him about the Blu-ray release of Twisted Issues, trying to get him to see if he'll put the soundtrack out on vinyl, because all of that music just be is lost, and it deserves all that punk music by his friends in Florida that he shot with deserves to be found. So
it's
either way, if you haven't heard that episode 2 weeks ago on the main feed, go back and check it out. But then last week over on the bonus feed, there, for the first time since Jamie and I started the show, there is a brand new Planet of the Apes movie that released in theaters. And we were like, well, shit, how can we turn down finally talking about one of the most famous science fiction films of all time that we have somehow neglected to cover, especially one that an entire franchise I hold dear to my heart, watching it as a kid, the first one specifically. So we finally talked about the 1968 film Planet of the Apes, which is both a thought-provoking piece of pessimistic, apocalyptic science fiction that also features just many, many scenes of Charlton Heston in a loincloth beating the shit out of monkeys or being attacked by monkeys, drawn in super expensive Fox studio craftsmanship.
Yeah, and just yelling theatrically the entire time. It's an amazing performance, honestly. And
sweating.
The big thing that I often forget about that movie is, because I'm so focused on Taylor Heston's character, but Zaius is also a really amazing and deep character, knowing the origins and all of that and hiding things from the society. It's fantastic.
Yeah, and then we paired it with the sort of very rushed sequel that they were like, holy fuck, everyone absolutely loved how depressing of a twist ending that first Planet of the Apes had. We need to get more going right away. And they made a movie called Beneath the Planet of the Apes, which was a movie that's part really bizarre, beat for beat kind of a rehash of the first movie before turning into, I think, maybe one of the most insane franchise films that has ever been greenlit by a Hollywood studio, including an ending that actually tries to one-up the severity and intensity of the original film. And a lot of people, I think, have troubling feelings about it, especially because the budget was slashed in half for it. It definitely does look a little bit cheaper, but man, if you want to see just a cult of mutants under Manhattan worshiping the bomb and getting into armed conflict with fascist gorilla apes, Jesus Christ, what an insane movie.
Yeah, it really also has one of those endings that for the movies we're going to be talking about today made me question how the hell they even got off the ground with these stories. So it is insane. It is funny that it seems like a tradition for Planet of the Apes to just have to end in some type of doomed fashion. And this week's no different.
Yep. For a little while, everyone was like, it's a horrible time politically, and we want to see our movies kind of cathartically reflect that a little bit. So enjoy some guys in silly costumes and then be depressed as hell in the last 5 minutes. And yeah, that it transitions us perfectly into this week's episode, where we are going to be talking about the next films in the Planet of the Apes franchise into the 1970s that tried to follow up again, destroying the entire planet. And to join us, we have invited our resident monster creature, goofy guys in costumes expert, Mr. Cameron Fetter of Podcast About List. Cameron, how you doing?
Hey, how's it going? I'm doing good. Thanks for having me back.
Good to have you.
Dude, are you ready to go ape mode? Do you wish to return to monkey?
I can't wait.
Depressing ape mode.
Yeah, very, very. I knew Cameron was one of the few people I knew when we were eventually going to do one that I was like, well, we have to have. Every time he talks to us, he's like, I like a guy in a rubber suit. I like Bigfoot. I like Godzilla. I was like, he just made perfect sense to talk about Planet of the Apes with us. Now, Cameron, we've invited you on this episode rather than having you pick the movies like we usually let guests do, but just because you've graciously done us a solid doesn't mean we're not going to put you to work, much like how the humans treat apes in one of these movies. So what are the two titles we're talking about today?
Yeah, today we are talking about Escape from the Planet of the Apes from, I think, 1971, and
Correct.
then Conquest of the Planet of the Apes, which is 1972, the next year.
Yeah, they were pumping these out like crazy. They were like one a year.
Because I think that the other two were what, 68 and 69, right?
I believe so. Or was it
68
70?
and 70?
Yeah,
I think it was
Wow.
Beneath was the one where they took a 2-year break to conceive of how a sequel would even be possible.
It took them 2 years to think of the mutants.
Yeah, true. And what's crazier though is that they were like, somehow it only took them a year to dig themselves out of one of the most hilariously like producer
How do you get out of
mindset
this? Yeah.
like corners someone has ever dug themselves into.
Yeah, and ending
like,
so like completely impossible to come back from that it even destroys the credit music. There's no, you can't even finish the movie.
Yeah, narrator. It's just saying, and the world was destroyed. The end of the film.
Yeah, couldn't even find a way to show how this movie ended because it is so final.
Oh my god.
Yep. But they managed to do it. And Apes, there was 3 more Apes movies. We're going to be talking about 2 more today. There was also a TV show, which I've never seen, but the battle for the Planet of the Apes ended up leading directly into a TV show that came out also in 1974. So for like 1968 to 1974 was ape fever. People could not get enough. And then eventually they said, okay, we've had enough. No more.
I've heard the show is based around Cornelius, and I'm wondering if Zira is in it as well, and if it's more of this like what we'll be talking about with Escape, where it's kind of more the like familial comedy stuff, almost like a sitcom for a little while, in a sense.
Dude, people loved Cornelius.
Yeah.
Cornelius is...
Oh yeah.
He's so
cool,
cool,
man.
So that's
He
what
is
we're doing.
He is awesome.
He is rad.
Very excited to talk about his makeover montage and his suit drip that he rocks in Escape. But
I'm gonna have
so
to
we're
watch
going to be
this
talking.
TV show, man. Damn, I did not even know
me
that
too.
this existed.
Yeah. And I think it is the original Cornelius that plays Cornelius.
It
if I
is.
read correctly. Yeah.
Roddy
wow, yeah.
McDowell.
That's
He
pretty cool.
appeared in every single Planet of the Apes thing except for Beneath because of a scheduling conflict, even though Cornelius was in it, but they had to briefly recast him, which we talked about last week.
Yeah.
But before we get too spoiler centric here, let's jump into it. We're going apes mode as we've said, but we're gonna kick things off here. We're gonna start off with Escape from the Planet of the
The
Apes.
relentless chase. The stunning climax.
Zira, I want that baby. If you won't give it to me, I'll shoot.
Why was Washington thrown into a turmoil by this one baby?
Stop him!
Escape from the Planet of the Apes.
All right, we are talking Escape from the Planet of the Apes, the 1971 American science fiction film directed by Don Taylor, written by Paul Den. The third film, obviously, in the Planet of the Apes franchise, this time starring in the lead roles Roddy McDowell and Kim Hunter as 2 recurring fan favorite supporting characters from the first 2 films, Dr. Zira and Dr. Cornelius, the liberal chimp psychiatrist and archaeologist combo who very much politically disagreed with the more conservative and hawkish orangutans and gorillas who were doing all of the brutal ape supremacist violence on humans that we were talking about last week. But since last week's episode was a Patreon episode exclusively for the patrons, maybe as a quick recap from last week's episode, and to maybe get Cameron's position on some of the first two setups that get us to these movies. Before diving into Escape, since also the clever and slightly complicated reversal setup for this one does require a little bit of an explanation of how we got here. Ape Fever, once again, all started in 1968 with the original Planet of the Apes, the brainchild of French novelist Pierre Boulle, who wrote the original La Planète de Sing, that was then adapted by the Twilight Zone's Rod Serling, whose feel for sort of science fiction allegory and bleak existentialism was pretty unparalleled around that time, and who we have to thank for the really famous movie structure and twist ending that film has, because that was totally to him. And he was paired with the Lawrence of Arabia screenwriter Michael Wilson. What an incredible merging of writers, who spent his time blacklisted in the 1950s and writing these incredibly politically and sort of psychologically engaged historical spectacle films, including obviously Lawrence of Arabia, but Bridge on the River Kwai as well, which was also a novel written by Boulle. And each of those writers was doing drafts of and taking a stab at just one of the coolest concepts in science fiction film history, where essentially a cynical macho American astronaut crash lands on an unknown planet thousands of years into light speed hibernation travel and discovers that on this topsy-turvy planet, the humans are the ones treated like these inferior sort of savage animals, to be hunted, caged, and ruled over by an entire political, scientific, and militarized society of hyper-intelligent apes. Obviously a premise inherently loaded with all kinds of crazy genre images, from the pulpy survival adventure thriller stuff to full-on science fiction horror, and obviously all kinds of angry and provocative social criticism, political satire, all that about race, war, religion, science. Not all of it completely sensibly. Some of it is just, aren't these crazy political times, and we're responding to it. But what I think we really focused on last week talking about it was that not only is it a legitimately like thought-provoking, sort of piece of apocalyptic sci-fi nihilism on the page, it is also realized into a pretty spectacular piece of Hollywood craftsmanship by the Fox in-house journeyman Franklin J. Schaffner. We talked about the gorgeous scope photography that does these elegant sort of Western landscapes of the Arizona desert canyons to really highlight the sort of alienation and the harshness of this locale. But then on a moment's notice, we'll just be like, now we're doing these chaotic, disorienting, handheld man versus ape, like chase action set pieces, apes on horses doing hunting massacres, or that chase through Ape City where Taylor sees his crewmates like stuffed and lobotomized. And there's even a gunfight kind of bit in the finale. All of that stuff is amazing. The prosthetic makeup effects by John Chambers, which somehow gets nuanced performances out of people in silly ape mask costumes, is actually pretty astonishing. And we also talked about the unsettling and sort of atonal musical score by Jerry Goldsmith. I think this was the stuff that we were the most just like, what a piece of craftsmanship.
Yeah, specifically in the introduction, I think it's the very opening theme in Planet of the Apes. It's everything just feels off about it. There's like this creepy mystery to it. There's these kind of like high tension strings that are, everything just seems kind of offbeat and off time. And it's great. We've been talking a lot about him this year.
It's true. Goldsmith is a legend. But Cameron, what was your first experience watching Planet of the Apes? Did you watch it when you were younger or when you were older? I'm just curious. I ask most people this question, even on the street.
I think that my dad was very into monster movies when he was a kid, and that's like where I got a lot of it from. So I definitely was like I knew basically everything about Planet of the Apes when I was a kid. Like I knew all the character names, I knew the story, I knew the twist, and like all this stuff. But I don't think I ever actually watched.
Dude, you were the coolest kid in class. Everyone was like, "Dude, totally. Tell us all the Planet of the Apes lore."
Yeah, I know who Cornelius is. And very popular. But yeah, no, I feel like I was in a weird place where I was kind of a little bit immersed in, and I was like, I thought Planet of the Apes was really cool, but I don't think I actually watched the movie until I was older.
Damn.
And then I also hadn't watched even, I mean, I like these movies a lot, but I hadn't watched, these two movies until you guys asked me to do this episode, which were like just basically I was doing the thing where I was always like, oh, if I know I'm really going to like a movie, I just won't watch it because I want to save it.
True.
Now
I've done that a couple times, but then when you do it, it does feel very good. I did that for the longest time because I'm a huge Clint Eastwood fan, and everyone loves it, The Bridges of Madison County. So I saved it for literally like 8 years, and finally my girlfriend and I both sat down. We were like, you know what, we want to watch a sad romance that's going to have us both sobbing at the end. So that we said, okay, fine, it's Clint Eastwood time.
I recently did that with
I always do that. I always save the movies and I watch them. I'm like, why did I do that? I should just watch this.
Just watch these things all the time. It makes me feel great.
What am I doing? I don't need to be watching bad movies.
I know.
Wait to watch good ones.
Dude, I have the same bad addiction. This is so off topic, but I just started watching that new Jerry Seinfeld comedy. Anyway, it's bad.
Oh, God.
Yeah, it's bad so far. But I digress.
Yeah, well, I explained to Jamie on last week's episode that I watched Planet of the Apes for the first time when I was quite young, and I explained how it correlated with that scene from Mad Men where Don takes his kid to go and watch it in the theater, and the little kid goes, and he's just like, he gets to the end of the movie, and he's like, Jesus. And Don just like looks at him. He's like, damn, I think I just like ruined my kid's day. And I was like, that was exactly my experience with the first film when I was younger. So the first existential thought I ever had watching all of these apes beat the crap out of Charlton Heston, which maybe the one thing we haven't mentioned, the all-timer performance from Hollywood star Charlton Heston from like The Ten Commandments and from like Touch of Evil. He's spectacular in that movie. And just he's so good and so well used because he's playing this like ferociously tough, like sweaty, macho American leading man. And all of those qualities are used in the film cathartically because he's fighting back against these very oppressive, class of apes. And he's doing so in a Tarzan fucking loincloth. And it engages you, I think, on this very simple, silly level, like this animal level of especially when you're a kid, you're like, look at this badass tough guy just like screaming at these apes and, who are doing violence. And, I love that the movie engages you in that kind of pulpy way. Until that character despairingly realizes in a bit of an iconic gut punch of an ending that he's not on an alien planet. He's actually on Earth thousands of years later following this nuclear war and Holocaust. But it's exactly his vengeful and violent, like primitive, like the thing you're indulging in, the thing that he's like very like, I'm fighting back. Those instincts that he has are exactly what resulted in the humans annihilating themselves in the first place. So it almost like kind of punishes you for enjoying the movie in that way.
Yeah.
Which is why I think it's like lasted and endured as long as it has.
Yeah, absolutely. It is interesting that his character even kind of starts with that misanthropy of like just he already has a distrust for humanity in a way. He's already laughing at the American flag being planted, all of that. And then it just kind of, once he's forced into that position of being oppressed, he fights back and then just further realizes that he was doomed from the start. It's an incredible arc.
Yeah, well, and somehow one of the most depressing pop studio science fiction fantasies of all time made a legitimate blockbuster haul at the box office. $33 million on a $5 million budget. I said this last week, but that's the equivalent of $300 million on a $40 million budget today. And it garnered tons of critical acclaim for its timely political themes and its well-made sort of genre construction, and which is what resulted in this very quickly turned around sequel called Beneath the Planet of the Apes, which again, as I mentioned, kind of starts as a subpar beat for beat rehash of the first film, but there's a reason we have to address it before jumping into Escape. And when I say rehash, I mean like a knockoff
like for the first 40
Heston
minutes.
actor in the same costume who speed runs every plot twist that he experiences. Before though, letting new series writer who took over for all of the sequels we're going to be talking about today, as well as Beneath. He kind of became the guy they went to, took over when Serling and Wilson weren't available. A guy named Paul Den, who was well known for these pulp espionage films like Goldfinger and more serious, politically dour ones like The Spy Who Came In From the Cold. And they just let him go fucking hog wild and further develop all the sort of extinction anxieties and the sort of grim misanthropy, and add some elements that were like blatantly talking about the Vietnam War and sort of Cold War nuclear holocaust and sort of reactionary religious fears as well, introducing this entire second half of a movie that's almost like the most evil Star Trek episode you've ever seen, where the characters discover a subterranean cult of mutant, like irradiated telepaths that survive the nuclear destruction.
Yeah.
They worship the atomic bomb.
Unbelievable. I fucking love that movie so much. I don't get,
Dude,
I mean, I can understand that people see the first half and like are like kind of check out, but it's like, how many shitty first halves of movies have you watched in your life? Like, at least you're watching a shitty first half of a movie that is a retelling of an awesome movie, and then the second half is so sick. I don't know.
Yeah,
dude, I needed you last week, man. No, it's Jamie absolutely still liked it, but I also recognize that Cameron and I are very unique in our we are the strongest soldiers, I think, for Beneath the Planet of the Apes, which I just think is an absolutely insane movie.
I think it's so great.
And even weird shit that happens during that first half, like it has a few, for me, unforgettable franchise moments, like the conservative minister of faith and science, the orangutan Dr. Zaius. That scene of him having evil chats with the fascist gorilla in the sauna. An image I will literally never forget. The atomic him mutants, like pulling their face masks off and revealing their like radiation poisoned skin.
Yeah,
absolutely ridiculous.
I also really like the chimp protests that it turns into like a handheld protest footage as it gets deeper into the action sequence. It's
the fascist really cool gorilla character just beating up anti-war chimp protesters is like a definitely a wild image. And we talked about how that fascist gorilla was almost played by Orson Welles last week, which would have been
ridiculous.
People would talk about Beneath the Planet of the Apes more if that had happened. I think Heston almost negotiated that, but I don't think he wanted to put all that makeup on. But yeah, I mean, also gorillas being strung upside down and crucified and burned alive. Yes. And again, an entire gruesome subterranean like siege massacre finale that has a more hopeless ending somehow than the first film, where Heston, who only agreed to be in a sequel as a supporting character, essentially if they wrote him out by killing him and donated his salary to charity, he's forced to watch all his friends die, like Nova and B. Heston, all these characters, they all get massacred. And then he presses the nuke button, killing both the mutants and the apes and the entire planet, completing this cycle of destruction where he becomes the very annihilator he was so horrified by that he lost faith in humanity in the first film, which to me is like just one of the most shocking and kind of nihilistic endings that any major Hollywood studio has ever agreed to do. I'm still wondering why they agreed to do it, because that first film made so much money, that second film made so much money, and this was all a long-winded way of getting to the fact that we had to explain that when it turned out that Beneath was basically as much of a commercial hit, they were like, oh fuck, we blew up the planet. I don't really, and we killed every character,
everyone. They were like, quickly, who wasn't on screen when he pressed the button?
Yes, we need to figure out. So it literally went to the screenwriter for Beneath the Planet of the Apes, Paul Den. He was asked to get ready another sequel within a year and write himself out of one of the most hilarious franchise holes of all time, where he killed everyone, he blew the planet up, and thus escaped from the Planet of the Apes, which we will start jumping into here. He had to come up with this ridiculous premise where entirely off screen, Zira and Cornelius, who kind of hardly appear in Beneath the Planet of the Apes, honestly, but most people really like their presence in the first film as like the two chimps who actually help Heston and kind of like humans and don't want to see humans mistreated. And it turns out that they somehow find and fix Heston's original spaceship that had sunk into the water in the original film. And they got on it and flew off planet before it was nuked, and then somehow, due to shockwaves, time traveled to Earth in 1972, long before its nuclear annihilation, and also coincidentally where they could spend a lot less money on production design and makeup and just do a bunch of location shooting, and also not have, just only have like functionally like 2 ape characters, I guess technically 3, but one exits pretty fast, and essentially generating this mirrored concept to the original, where talking apes arrive in our time in a spaceship instead of us in theirs, which at first is kind of handled like this relatively goofy and kind of sweet, essentially like a fish out of water, almost like TV movie story about how humans react to ape astronauts who can talk. And we watch their reputations go from scientific phenomenon to these charming celebrities to this eventually a kind of violent bureaucratic government problem, slowly introducing things like political assassination and civil rights to some of the previous anxieties we've talked about these movies having, like the religious dogma stuff, the nuclear holocaust stuff, and eventually in its final reel kind of becoming like a 70s political thriller in a really, really dark way. And reverting back to the incredibly grim social messaging that the franchise started with, but getting a little bit bloodthirsty with the political sort of military response to these characters who end up having to kind of run away the same way Heston did from the ape leaders. But it is a movie of intense whiplash, I will describe it, especially the very first time I watched it. Going into it a second time, I was kind of more prepared, and I was like, oh, this is a normal movie. But every time I've ever told someone to watch it, they're like, that was not a normal movie. Why the fuck did you make me watch that?
There is something about, I think it's because in the first 2, they kind of set up for a little bit of this doomed quality, whereas this one, you see people conspiring and all of that, but a lot of it is based on the celebrityism and like them getting used to the society and people interacting with them and them seeing this human civilization. So when it eventually does get to its doomed change, which we'll get to, it feels a little bit more unexpected and more of a whiplash than the previous 2, at least for me. Just because a lot, like this one is a lot more comedic. And I wasn't expecting that. Just given how we end with the last one. Yeah, exactly. There's like full on gags in this one. They have like a montage of gags. Right. Exactly. Yeah. Cornelius is getting fitted up. It's pretty sweet.
That's what. Yeah. Dude? I was like, how could they find that dress for Zira? Like, they have a dress that basically looks like the clothes that they wear on the ape in the ape future.
Yeah, a little bit.
And crazy. Like, what store is selling that?
With a past twist. Yeah. I thought
well, and this one's also a lot less, it's less action heavy too, right? And not really spectacle driven. Like there's functionally no action in this movie until the final reel, which is the only stuff that gets anywhere near as dark and visceral and unhinged as like Beneath does, for example, spending a lot more time on its sort of characters, sort of complex political and sort of moral and I guess sort of paradoxical time travel situation that they've fallen on. Like it's a lot more dialogue heavy, sort of intimate relationships they actually develop with the various humans, including some of these trusting scientist characters, and then obviously some of the more sort of military minded bureaucratic ones that we'll talk about. So like that's obviously a big change. I think people were like, this script is like a little engaging me a little bit more than Beneath, because this did get a lot better reviews than Beneath at the time. I think people felt like Zira and Cornelius were written like actual characters, and it did give, I think in fairness, a chance to McDowell and Hunter to actually give very good performances. Like they are very funny, they are very adorable, they're charismatic, you actually like spending time with them, and they're obviously already characters you're endeared to because they were the kind of liberal anti-war scientist apes who, were, against the warmongering hysteria that was taking place in the first 2 films. And they do end up having a lot of fun with the humans in this movie, which we'll talk about the specific, getting drunk and rocking suits and all the stuff they end up doing.
I think Don Taylor even said that he was attracted to this movie because of the characters, that it was more comedic. It was more based on like those kind of interactions rather than just the thrill and the twist and the science fiction aspect of it. Because a lot of this
Don Taylor taking over directing duty on this, who I've not seen anything else by except for literally not anything else by, but Omen 2, Damien did, and I didn't. He also did the final countdown with Kirk Douglas. I guess he's like a fairly successful like old Hollywood actor actually.
Yes.
From the 40s and 50s, he was in like Naked City and Father of the Bride and Stalag 17. And I guess he became a TV director first. So he did some episodes of Alfred Hitchcock Presents and Night Gallery, which was Rod Serling's non-Twilight Zone show, which is maybe where they pulled him from for this. Because I was like, I had never seen anything else by Don Taylor. It's still the only thing I've seen from him, but I think it's perfectly competently directed. I think the photography is actually pretty nice. It's shot by Joseph F. Birouk, who's the guy who shot It's a Wonderful Life, which is like a weird thing to also be shooting. He also shot the Sam Fuller Western 40 Guns though. So I was like, this guy is, does some nice for hire work. And I will say they brought Jerry Goldsmith back to do the music, which is cool. Even though it's not as wild as the first movie, which is still one of the just like craziest scores. They're just like banging pots together. There's like xylophones on it. I've never understood that score, but it's amazing.
Yeah, it's wild. Yeah, he's matching the tone of this film a little bit more. So it's just slightly more conventional in that sense. But I mean, he's still amazing. He's always amazing. I do like even the opening where it comes in with that.
The opening's great.
The helicopter and the crashed ship. I love the shot of the scuba divers coming in from the military and just riding it in like it's like a quarter of a dead whale carcass or something. It's just massive. It looks very cool.
I like that we hear the ocean sounds from the ending of the first movie, which is like one of my favorite details of the first movie, which is that the credits just roll and you just hear the ocean. This one opens on those sounds as the helicopters find Taylor's spaceship having crash landed near an LA beach. And, it's an Army helicopter spotting it. There's like, they're informing a general so they can go in and open it up and welcome their lost astronauts home who have been gone for 2 years before taking the helmets off and revealing to them that Dr. Zira, Dr. Cornelius, and a third Dr. Milo have arrived in place of the astronauts, the human astronauts that they were expecting. And I will say one of my favorite things that Jerry Goldsmith does here is that stunned like drum line that hits, where it's like it's added this like sick like 70s like funk music hitting as they all like prepare to salute and go like, "Welcome, gentlemen," and then they all just go, "What the fuck? There's monkeys in those spacesuits."
The funniest thought is to think that they turned into monkeys rather than this is some like alien interaction. They're like, "Oh my God, Taylor, what happened?"
Looking good, Taylor. Looking good.
It's a great tone setter and kind of like mood thing for especially opening with the kind of same sounds and kind of iconography of the really depressing twist ending of the first one, and then turning it into like a what? Like, hold on, I gotta run to the telephone. Hold on.
This is gonna be a screwball comedy now? Yeah. It's great.
Loading them into army trucks, hiding from the public in the army base, like quarantine, with also, by the way, small cameo from the god of acting, M. Emmett Walsh.
I saw him in the credits, but I couldn't figure out where he was in this. I couldn't spot it.
He's the guy in the opening who says that like the zoo is free except for the mauled fox cub and the depressed gorilla, and then excitedly gives them their oranges while they're all like in their cages, like dressing and setting the table and start eating with like forks and knives, and they're all just like
with forks and knives is insane.
It's so good.
It's one of the things I love in all these movies is there's always something where somebody has to, either an ape or a human has to pretend to not be intelligent, and it really seems like these people don't understand what that means. Like it'll always be like, okay, we can't talk, but we'll like perform complex operations with blocks and cut our oranges with forks and knives.
Absolutely.
They're like, wait a minute, these apes aren't primitive, they're sophisticated, and it's so funny. They're just like, we'll just not talk because we know that from it is funny though, because it is a character detail, because they're using the tip that they kind of learned from Taylor, which was obviously that when he spoke, he got into a lot of trouble at the idea that someone could speak. And it's so funny that they would think, well, how unnormal would it be for apes to set their table. I don't know.
Yeah, one of my favorite details is the timing of like the comedy for specifically Roddy McDowell when he's receiving the oranges. He gets the first 2 oranges and he kind of looks at him and then looks at the other guy and he's like, okay,
he's like,
well, if you're gonna give me another one, and then he puts his hand out, and it like right there it shows intelligence, and I just love those little moments leading up to even them just eating. It's fantastic.
Yeah, I'm so willing to suspend my disbelief for it and like I feel like it's such a silly little nitpick, but I do also love the idea that nobody is looking at these apes and being like, don't these apes look a little weird to you? Especially we don't have any apes that look like this on Earth.
Especially when there's brief moments where they are beside actual chimps as well, and they're still doing it. They're like, they look. Well, that's what they were doing.
They're having like actual chimps be like stand-ins as babies, I guess.
Right.
Like I think they did that in Conquest too, which is a fun. It's like creating an alternate Earth where it's like, okay, this is what chimpanzees look like, and then actual chimpanzees are what these chimpanzees babies look like.
Yeah, it's like they form into the human puppet version or whatever. Yeah.
It's that, and then like, wait, they're unpacking their suitcase and changing their outfits. I don't understand. These are and they're just caging them in the LA Zoo where we meet the sort of humorous Zira and Cornelius human scientist couple counterpart in the form of a Dr. Lewis played by Bradford Dillman and a Dr. Stevie played by Natalie Trundy, who are essentially meant to be the more liberal and kind of understanding of the apes, and set them up with some color and sort of shape association tests that are very.
They're the humans, Zira and Cornelius, essentially.
Exactly. Yeah. Exactly. And although it's so funny that it immediately insults Zira's intelligence to the point where she just reveals that she can speak. She's like, I loathe bananas.
Oh, that's that's my favorite part of her character is that the plan stops immediately because she's just like, I'm not dealing with this bullshit. I'm not stupid. I love that quality of her character. They have
such great characters. I mean, they are just great. Like, I love how she is so like indignant and like always ready to like stand up for stuff, and I love that Cornelius is just like sassy and just like sits back. It's like when they're in the hearing or whatever, and they say, does the male specimen speak too? And he says, only when she lets me.
Wife humor, love it.
They get like the full like TV sitcom audience response too. Everyone oh, those two, we love these two.
Like they're almost clapping and wooing. Yeah, it's great.
It's awesome because obviously the news gets out that the quote unquote manned spaceship arrived with smart monkeys on it. That they're like, wait, what the hell? And we meet the president's like head science advisor, played by this Eric Braeden, as the paranoid bureaucrat named Dr. Otto Hasslein, who Braeden we've talked about before actually once on this show. He was Joseph Sargent's sort of paranoid Cold War AI supercomputer movie. What was that called? From 19. It was 1 year before this. He was definitely cast because of this movie too. Colossus, the Forbin Project. Just one of the most like affectless 1970s guys of all time. He just always looked like he's like bemused and drinking a martini, and he's good at playing quietly creepy while kind of pretending to be charming. And I always knew this guy when I was a kid because my mom loved that soap opera Young and the Restless. He's still on that show right now. He's the guy. He's like the main Young and the Restless guy. He's been on that show for like 50 years. Still going.
I liked that guy a lot in this, not because he I think did anything that was too remarkable, but just because the first second he was on screen, I was like, oh yeah, that's the bad guy.
Fuck this guy.
Here we go. Instantly.
Yeah, absolutely.
And he's a character too actually referenced in the first film. He's the scientist who comes up with the time curve theory that Heston's team is talking about, that they're using to pull off like their light speed travel calculations that they're doing. Maybe he's not a very good scientist because those calculations did not work. But when he's doing his opening monologue at the beginning of Planet of the Apes, he talks about Hasslein's theory or whatever it is. And so And at one point too, they actually let Eric Braeden try to like humorously explain it on TV, and he's just going on about like infinite regression loopholes, and like literally nobody understands what he's saying, and it actually doesn't really make sense.
It makes no sense at all. It's so funny that they decided to like put that in there. I feel like
they're basically like, if we confuse the audience enough, we'll get away with this scientific explanation. It's fine.
Yeah, they're like, fair enough. You know, it's time travel jargon. You know, they're in 1972 now.
Again, I'm also so ready to accept it, and I have no problem with it, but it is really funny to make a big enough deal of it that you're like bringing in like visual aids and stuff to explain it when it's just actual nonsense. Like, just let him say something and like get it over.
Yeah, the whole thing where he's just like, really so trying. Time is sort of like a guy painting a landscape, but then painting himself painting a landscape, and then painting himself painting and he just keeps doing it over. And I'm like, I'm not understanding how this got them to Earth, but it's fine.
I was thinking they were trying to do some multiverse thing or something like that at a certain point, but I just let it go and went, I accept
it's like
this.
A painter painting a landscape. It's also like a highway.
Yeah, I just already accepted it because they do the most hilarious thing possible, which is that they have a third super smart chimp scientist with them, and they literally go, that's the guy who could probably explain everything, that how it worked. But yeah, he got strangled to death by a gorilla in the zoo that they left him close to. And I thought that was it. I was going to be like, yeah, that's fine. The one smart character who can explain how this all happened, yeah, he got strangled to death. So there's going to be no explanation in this movie. I was like, fair enough.
I honestly loved that. It caught me so off guard, even though I like should have known that was coming. I mean, that's what happens at the beginning of every Planet of the Apes movie, where someone gets stranded somewhere, all their friends die. But like, it really did. I was like, whoa, that's crazy.
It happens kind of out of nowhere because it precedes the scene that we were just talking about, where Kim Hunter Zira is kind of playing along with the doctors, and it's very comedic and lighthearted. And then all of a sudden, Milo's just getting strangled in the corner and dying. It was shocking to me. It was kind of a whiplash moment.
It's also great too, because that immediately the government takes his body and they're like, okay, we're going to start dissecting it immediately. And it definitely kind of sets this undertone where you're getting like kind of settled into this new goofy tone that is kind of a new thing for the Planet of the Apes franchise. But it's like, oh no, there's still something bubbling under here. Like, there's still,
Oh, for sure. Yeah. I mean, I think you get that during the public sort of presidential inquiry aspect too, where they are, sort of, they're talking to and assessing the articulation and thinking skills of these two remaining sort of crash landed chimps that were inhabiting Taylor's spacecraft. And, Zira and Cornelius do reveal that, that they can talk, that they can think, their entire history. They talk about the fact that the gorillas are militaristic nincompoops and the orangutans are pseudo intellectuals, and the chimps they're literally explaining like the caste system of the Planet of the Apes to all these human characters in the 1970s who have no idea what they're talking about. And they're explaining that, where they come from, apes talk and humans are the ones who are, animals who are, she almost lets slip hunted and dissected, but they examined like dumb animals as she tries to like save herself and do it.
I love
and
that
tells
moment.
them
that really made me like that. It was so good. That I feel like that's another thing where it's like, okay, this is kind of goofy, and like in a lesser movie, I feel like I would see this and be like, oh yeah, okay. But at that moment when she says dissect, and you see the like scientist guy kind of lean forward and raise his eyebrows a little bit, I was like, oh shit, like, oh, watch out. Like,
you're not going to be cute and cuddly celebrities if you're saying that, my entire job was like digging into humans' brains.
And I guess that what's cool about that moment is that's kind of what the movie's doing. Like, you have all these underlying darkness and doom that we know is going to come to the surface, but the movie tries its best, at least for a while, to keep that comedic tone of just getting to know these characters, getting to know the new society. But then something like that sneaks in where she accidentally says dissect, and then
and also that the characters have to address it. Like it is good writing. It is that the characters go, that revelation that we like anatomically experimented on humans as scientists, like, the scientists will empathize and kind of understand the context in which we would say that we did those things. But obviously there's other people who would not react that way, and they would immediately be frightened by these talking apes who like murdered humans for a living. And they obviously also want to hide the fact that they knew Colonel Taylor, because they know that he's dead and that the Earth exploded in their timeline, and they maybe don't want to tell the humans that, oh yeah, so 2,000 years in the future, we dominate you and the entire world ends. And obviously that's information that would scare people into doing maybe some of the dark and grim things they end up doing in this film. But briefly in the movie, it proves to be a smart technical move, as Zira and Cornelius spend a good portion of this movie just endearing themselves to the humans, just exploring 70s LA as essentially honorary guests of the US government. As a result, they're figuring out what TV is, they're taking bubble baths, figuring out what refrigerators are. They're being moved from the zoo immediately to like a fancy hotel where they're confused by the idea of like a bellhop trying to like help them with their luggage. They're getting fitted for tailored suits and dresses in a full-on rom-com like makeover montage. I do love that moment of Cornelius when he steps out, and obviously he looks pimp as hell. Oh yeah. And Zira's looking at him, and then you could tell he immediately feels himself. He puts his hand on his chest and like does a little face. He's like, he's just does a little pose,
just killing it. And then I think Zira does a similar thing where the dress is revealed and they're both like just kind of awing at each other. It's very cute. I also love the two back-to-back gags where Zira is like becoming a feminist activist, and then Cornelius is watching boxing and calls it beastly. He's like the only one not having a good time. Just classic stuff.
Yeah, I feel
going
like
to their first high-end parties too.
Yeah, part of what makes this tone work so well too, I feel like, is the first two movies just have such like depressing, bleak, horrible endings that I feel like that is they're setting that up in your mind, and I'm not sure if they could top either of those movies endings in this one. So I think they take a smart move of like, okay, maybe our ending is not gonna be as horrible and apocalyptic as you've seen before, but we're really going to make you feel it because the first like hour of this is going to be so fun and so cute.
We're going to lull you and disarm you. And you know what? As a result, it actually does make it feel as apocalyptic, even though it's not like someone blowing up the entire planet. Like it is on a much smaller scale, but the feeling of it is still like a crazy gut punch. And I will say one of the images I think is astonishing that it made it into a movie.
Totally. I think I know what you're talking about.
Yes, but yeah, no, all this early stuff is like the apes like getting drunk for the first time, drinking grape juice plus, which obviously is wine, but there's something, everyone seems to be delighted by them except for Dr. Hassline, who, when finding out that Zira is pregnant, actually does not. One of the first like really dark moments that is like just a well-written character beat is when he's trying to get her drunk to have her sort of drunkenly confess more information honestly about the future and the timeline, the stuff she was hiding in the public hearing, and he finds out that she's pregnant, and he immediately goes, "Oh yeah, the grape juice plus is like great for your pregnancy." He's like literally already trying to like kill her baby.
That. I was like, I really was like when he takes the like I fully was expecting him, even though I knew he was the bad guy, I was still expecting him to be like, no, you can't drink this. Like just really, I don't know. It really caught me off guard.
It's really unsettling to watch him just like kind of take advantage of the fact that, she has less knowledge of this specific world than he does. And he eventually records himself having that conversation with her to take to the president, where she confirms that in the future talking apes will dominate society. And in their timeline, they destroyed the earth by 3950 something or whatever. And he starts becoming increasingly paranoid and very manipulative about, suggesting altering the course of the future by essentially slaughtering these two apes and their unborn child, who we will soon know as baby Milo. And the president considers them very charming and very peaceful. And he's like, I do love that his main thing is like, well, the voters love them. I can't, I would be really unpopular and I'd probably get voted out of. It'd be really ugly to just like kill these apes in front of everyone. And no one would vote for me. And he literally says, before putting them up against the wall and shooting them, I want proof that their destructive future is like a mathematical fact and truth from you, and also like their fault. Because we know, obviously, it's not entirely true that it's their fault, that the humans also at some point annihilate themselves with nukes long before Zira and Cornelius are even born. And at what point in that scene they literally discuss the baby Hitler dilemma too, which I thought was one of the funniest. That's so fucking good. Which is where they get the tagline of the movie from too, where it's "Meet Baby Milo, who has Washington terrified." One of the greatest fucking taglines ever, with literally like a line pointing at Baby Milo on the poster. Like, look at this tiny chimp. Washington is
the destruction of human civilization as we know it. Yeah, it's
Baby Milo's fault.
The baby Hitler debate was awesome. I had no idea that was going to be thrown into the script, the philosophical debating here. I also like that
we need to kill Baby Milo to avoid nuclear annihilation.
I also like that it mirrors the stuff that they do specifically in the first one. They do a little bit in the second one, where you have Brent going up against the telepathic council. But with the first one, you have Heston going up against the Council of Apes, and they're kind of philosophically debating back and forth, and you have a mirror image of this, but just reversed. So I do like that they're kind of playing with the movie franchise itself a little bit too.
Yeah. Something else I like about this one that I think is great about Dr. Hassline is like, which I think in this one is definitely not as developed as some of the other ones, but there is an element, like I think Dr. Hassline is kind of maybe one of the most cartoonishly pure evil. Well, actually I say that and I'm thinking about Conquest. Not quite.
Yeah, I was gonna say he's more. Hassline has a couple other dimensions where it maybe even just in the performance at least, but like you do feel that he's like genuinely just like terrified of the future that this would happen.
Definitely.
And he thinks that this is like the way out, and he reveals himself to be a little bit more cruel and ruthless, I think, in the final third of the movie. But earlier on, he's actually surprisingly good at kind of being fake charming, or just like actually intellectually arguing his case.
Yeah, right. I think he's kind of the Zaius, like just doing these kind of mirror images of what each character represents in a sense. Like Zaius has, it's the same thing. He's kind of doing it through
fear. He's the fearful conservative.
Yeah, exactly. He's just like, I know better, and I can see the future more than these other people, so I'm just going to keep it under lock and key and deal with it.
He really wants to kill that baby, though. He really wants to kill that baby.
He is, I think that, definitely some of what makes him more, compelling and developed kind of melts away once he really is committed to getting that baby gone, no matter what. But I think there is a really great element that's like, what would you do to stop the entire Earth from being destroyed by nuclear weapons and the entire human race being enslaved? Like,
right?
They're like you watched those first two movies and they made you feel bad.
Yeah, you're like, I don't want to be in that situation. I'll say that.
Yeah, you don't want to be in that situation, do you? Like, and obviously, I think that probably most people would not kill the cutest baby in the world. But there is a dimension to that, Like, I feel like there is, even if the answer is not that, anything that Dr. Hassline is doing is in the right, there is kind of an undertow there of like, this guy is not just like, he's not playing the role of villain in the movie. He's figuring shit out. He has a pretty twisted worldview and he's not a good guy.
Yeah. But I think that's what Jamie was saying by comparing him to Dr. Zaius, where it's like Zaius is the antagonist of the Planet of the Apes for sure. But by the end of the film, you're sympathetic a little bit to how he came to the conclusions he came to, and like the actual, the math that he did to be like, you know what? The humans fucking annihilated the Earth. So why would we ever let people go into the Forbidden Zone? Why would we ever let Heston have power? Like, why would this isn't like it's there's a method here that he's actually displaying. And I guess you could say the same thing for Hassline. It's just as the movie goes on, Hassline reveals himself to be a little bit more sadistic, I guess, like when he takes them to the CIA sort of like a black site to interrogate them about, their future, where man's decline and fall by their own weapons happens, and the rise of apes occurs, and which they explain in their prehistory is all about plagues that befell dogs and cats, resulting in humans taking apes as pets and training them to do, basic services, and then eventually turning them into slave laborers who then militaristically resisted against their human oppressors, which we will talk about more in depth in Conquest, because they were clearly planting the seeds of a sequel. This time around, instead of like Beneath, they were like, we should set up more if we decide we want to make more down the line. So that's why they kind of tell this entire story about, this historic day, which is all commemorated by the species and documented in the sacred scrolls, where, this guy, he did not grunt, he articulated, and he spoke a word which had not been spoken to him in time without number by humans. He said no. This big moment that he builds to, which I think a lot of people, anyone who likes the rebooted series, would be familiar with too, because Circus actually gets to deliver that moment in Rise of the Planet of the Apes. It's maybe the best part of the movie.
Yeah,
it's great.
It is a great moment. And they also, I think, in this story that they're telling, they call him Caesar as well, right? So this is like an established.
I actually think they call him Aldo, actually, which is who comes up in battle later. Because we'll talk about it with Conquest. It's actually not the exact story. What they kind of imply is that the events of Escape actually made the events happen faster. Because I think they say that Aldo says no like thousands of years. Like the whole slavery thing happens over like hundreds and hundreds of years is what they say in their story. And then we watch it happen in Conquest over like 2 decades or something like that.
It's almost like an A-B timeline kind of thing. And then it just happens.
Kind of.
Yeah.
Yeah. It sounds like Hasline listened to that story and went, well, that shit's not happening. And then accidentally made it happen like 1,000 years faster.
Okay. Gotcha. I was curious too, just because we're on the topic of it with the new reboots or whatever you want to call them, the prequels, are these essentially now kind of remakes of Conquest and Battle, but they're just obviously doing very different things? Because I didn't know that, because I hadn't seen these. So now just thinking back on what I've seen in the new movies, it is Caesar. He's saying no. He's doing the uprising. So they're definitely
doing their own thing in the rebooted ones. Yeah. But when you guys watch Battle, you will be surprised at how much actually, because Battle is probably the worst one. I still kind of like it. You will be surprised watching Battle how much of Battle is in Dawn of the Planet of the Apes.
Gotcha.
Like in terms of like literal plot beats, like literal Caesar trying to make it work with like the sort of like post-apocalyptic sort of humans who have survived Conquest. There's a whole thing about Caesar having to deal with the fact that there's like a warmongering ape he can't control and he has to fight him at the end. It's like it's literally Dawn, like almost a lot of the same ideas.
Oh, very interesting. I didn't know that. So I always thought that these were kind of fresh prequels. I didn't know that they were getting from these sequels.
Oh, they're borrowing stuff for sure. Conquest and Battle are definitely the two that were being pulled from the most thematically in the new ones that they were making.
Gotcha.
And they're doing a pretty good job.
Yeah, I do like them.
But in this case, though, after listening to this speech, they drug Zira at one point just straight up so they can get more precise details. It's one of the most like kind of upsetting sequences in the movie where they have her legitimately just go through and describe, oh yeah, we hunted, we trapped, we shot humans for target practice. I gruesomely dissected every part of their body for science, and their corpses were made available to her by the guerrillas who were killing them for sport. It's like they really wanted her to say it in like the worst context possible so they could then use that recording as part of a larger sort of presidential commission that comes to the conclusion that while yes, Cornelius seems like a pretty objective academic historian, and Zira did commit atrocities in our time today, but in her time they're like, it's different. Humans are animals there. That's a whole thing. They actually try to come to a little bit of an objective conclusion about her testimony, but then but Hasline's concerns about the threat of what this means about ape supremacy and none of this should be ignored, and they do come to the conclusion that baby Milo should be aborted and the apes should have their reproductive tools tied.
It's unreal.
Something else I really like about the kind of interrogation sequence where I also thought that the part where Zira gets drugged is like so upsetting. And I think part of it is something else that the Planet of the Apes movies like do so well, which is that like even the good guys, quote unquote, are still like fully complicit, and they like still do all the bad stuff. I mean, and eventually they usually have a breaking point where they say, I won't do this anymore. But like I couldn't believe like Dr. Lewis, Dr. Hassline tells Dr. Lewis like, okay, give her sodium pentothal, like inject her. And the fact that Dr. Lewis is just like, okay, and then does it. It's like, are you serious? Like, this is the point in the movie where you're supposed to say like, no, I won't do it. You know what I mean?
Yeah,
like,
That's dehumanizing. And then they have a debate about how she's not human.
He's just like, yeah, you know what? I'll do it. You told me to do it. I don't like it, but I'm just going to do it anyway because that's how things are done. That's the way that this society is. And that's the same type of stuff we see in the other movies too. I think it's great. I think it's part of the reason that these movies stand the test of time so well is like, yeah, these are weird, muddy worlds where we're invoking political stuff, but we're not really, it's just kind of like, yeah, everything's a little fucked. Like,
yeah. I also, if I remember correctly, he even kind of tries to cushion it a little bit by saying it's like, this won't hurt you. It's just going to put you to sleep. Like, it's almost like he's justifying it to her and to him as well, even though it's resulting in, them being sterilized and being chased out of the city and everything else that's going to happen.
Yeah, and he's also, I need to be in the room as a witness as well.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, so it feels like he's trying to cushion it a little bit, but he's in a position where he has to do it, and he's not, heroic enough to really say that, to resist.
Well, and it's also just like his human bias, right? He's like, I'm a fucking zoo doctor. It's like, I do this to apes all the time.
Yeah,
he doesn't consider Zira, he does obviously think about her differently, but in that moment, he just, that's what his job is. And he has to kind of obey that. And it's not until after that he kind of realizes, it's not right that you're going to force Zira to have her baby aborted.
I think it's the product
like she wants that baby.
Do great things, which is like, one, it's like, yes, this is just how our society, like apes are not sentient, where like it's the same thing on Planet of the Apes. Like Zira and Cornelius have no problem like lobotomizing all of Taylor's crewmates because that's just how it is. Like there's how would you know? And then the other thing of like, and when a society is like this, like it's not one person who changes it. It's not somebody who there's pressure from all sides, and this is the way that these structures are built or whatever. And I think that's what's so great about it, is that representation of like, I kind of have the gut feeling that this is wrong, but I've never experienced anything different than it. And also the guy who has power over me and who can fire me, who can put me in jail, is telling me to do this. So I think I just have to do it, I guess.
Yeah, and I've trusted him many times
about it.
Right, and I've trusted him many times before. This is a system that has worked for me for decades now. It's just like it.
Right, it doesn't affect me, so I'll do it. Yeah.
Well, and it's a cool flip, obviously, of the original film, which so much of the shock factor of that film is that it's a human experiencing the very, very bleak treatment that animals do in just like the real, at the hands of humans. And it's so funny, like that movie is built around that shock hitting you through the entire movie. That Heston's like, holy fuck, being an animal would suck ass. That's like the whole movie.
It's such a testament to how well developed the characters are in this, that you care that much about like Zira.
That's exactly what I was going to say. Like now
she's not getting like dissected or lobotomized or anything. She's literally just getting put under, like she's getting involuntarily drugged, but you feel like she's about to get like cut open. You're like, no. What are you doing?
That's what's so cool is that by the time you hit this point, you've spent 3 movies with like good performances happening under good makeup that, these are functionally humanized, emotional characters for you. And so, like it's a testament to now they've gone back to being like, well, just a human doctor drugging a chimp. That's stuff you hear about every day. And but it still feels really horrible in this moment. And then you also know that Braden, he got what he wanted. He's like, this baby has been deemed for death. And I do like that moment where he's like, Zira wants her baby, and he's like, so do I. And he was like, but you want it dead. Like, what do you mean? Like, what do you mean?
Another just a quick point on the doctor again.
Oh yeah, go ahead.
Another interesting thing is that Zira, there's a moment I think in the first movie where, because of the dissecting and because of the experiments they've done, they discovered the more of the anatomy of the human, and they have those vocal cords that they're not using. And it's one thing that she uses to say that they could probably have the capability of speaking.
They could be trained.
And which means they also might have, more, they might be capable of more than we know. And I think that just that same idea goes with the doctor, where he might also think in that moment, like, if I do this, at least I can be the one in control and I can help in some capacity. But it's all misguided when we know the full context of things, of course. But I just thought it was an interesting
do you know
idea.
What? He's there when they need him. He gives Cornelius a gun to shoot himself in the head if he gets caught. So that's all.
Yeah,
that's all. That's all that really matters. Yeah,
puts the finale in Cornelius's hands, essentially.
Yeah, which eventually the final third of this movie is an entire it is an escape finale.
Yeah.
It's Zira and Cornelius accidentally killing their orderly for making a distasteful joke about their baby, and then running away from the CIA site to this like 70s funk you'd hear in like a crime thriller.
I gotta say too, either Cornelius is just jacked, like super tough with that hit.
That guy dies super easily.
Guy I've ever seen on screen. It's just like he basically smacks a tray into his face, and then they're like,
and then he dies.
Later, they're like,
blood's pouring out of his head.
And even Cornelius is like, he's fucking dead. What? I barely hit him. Like, what happened? It's honestly kind of hilarious. But anyway, oh man,
yeah. But they escape. There's a great bit of framing during their escape too, where they're sneaking around that security guard who's distracted by the phone call, and they literally like press the little gate button and go up behind him, and they're like, "Hey, bye, buddy," pretending to be like one of the employees who's leaving, and they trigger this entire sort of extended manhunt with Hassline, using essentially this violence to justify hunting them down and executing them, even though the president is saying, "I want them taken alive and tried. You're not just going to murder them." Luckily, Dr. Stevie and Dr. Lewis do help them escape the facility. They leave in her car while Zira is in labor, and they hide out briefly with the scientist's friend. What maybe my favorite character.
Oh my god!
This eccentric circus owner, animal lover named Armando, played by Ricardo Montalban, who they help take care of his zoo animals. And oh my god, he helps give birth to baby Milo, and he is fucking sick. He's just the most Italian man you've ever seen, smoking a cigar, saying things like, "You're asking me to risk imprisonment for the sake of 2 fugitive apes? The answer is 1,000 times yes." Or "I love chimps and hate those who try to alter the will of God's destiny."
He also has the best line also when he says, if it is man's destiny to be dominated, please God let him be dominated by such as you.
By chimps. That's how much he loves chimps. He's one of the greatest. He is like one of my favorite characters in these in these movies, and he helps make plans for them to escape to the Florida Everglades with him and his circus troupe, and essentially live happily ever after. He's I can't wait there.
Bigfoot.
Yeah.
I love also, we're talking about just how like kind of every character has a little bit of stink on them. Like nobody really is able to operate at like altruistically. Everyone is kind of being affected by these systems of power or the way that society is working or whatever. And then they're like, fuck it, let's put one guy in who just is fully right the whole time. Yeah. Because he instantly is like, yep, okay, I'm the good guy. All right, I'll help you. Yep, great. Okay, cool.
Sure, I'll help you. That doesn't sound strange at all to me. Let's do this.
Dude, what if in the third act we just introduced an Italian guy who runs a circus who loves chimps? That's it. That's the only thing, and that's the only thing that motivates every decision he makes in life.
It does have that awesome kind of like that, freaks quality where it seems like the circus family is one. They share that love for each other in some sense.
Yeah. It's also worth noting, we'll get to it when we get to the very final scene, but this Italian guy loving chimps literally kills us all, which is incredible. I love it. It's it's why he's a fantastic character. But Cornelius and Zira do end up realizing that the government officials are also searching zoos, they're searching circuses, they're searching all of these things that they feel like they could have escaped to. So they have to actually go and run even further into hiding after giving birth to baby Milo. And so they end up, as I said, Lewis gives them a gun because Cornelius very bleakly is like, if we're going to get caught, we're going to get killed. So give us a gun so that I can commit like murder suicide essentially, so that we don't have to deal with all of the torture of the US government. And also kisses them goodbye, which I do like as a funny gag of you're the second human that I've kissed. And I was like, once again, Zira just kissing humans in front of Cornelius. I was like, those two are married. They have a kid.
Kissing.
My favorite part of this, because I mentioned that in the first movie just as a funny little gag or whatever. But this moment is funny because Cornelius goes, all right, you know what? I'm going to kiss the female doctor.
I'm going to kiss
then.
the lady
I'm kissing
doctor.
Your wife, bro. What do you think about that? I thought that moment was very funny and cute. Oh, there was I really do like the moment too where they're it's on their escape route and they're on top of a hill and they can see the city and he's just like, oh, it looks like stars. It's actually really beautiful. And I think it's Zira that responds with, yeah, it is from here. It's like as soon as you get close up to the civilization, it gets a little bit more dicey. But I just love those like small little moments that they have on their way to escaping. Or almost. Yeah,
escaping. Do you know what? Briefly, you're like Zira and Cornelius with the baby. They're getting out of here, and then you're like, "Wait a minute, what franchise am I watching?"
That's the thing.
Hold the phone. You know, this is a franchise famous for incredibly bleak and miserable endings, and so of course the movie needs to deliver on it, despite all of the fun. Apes hanging out in human times antics that we've been having. Zira and Cornelius are hiding out in the finale in this abandoned LA shipyard near some oil fields with their little baby Milo, adorable baby Milo, who is just actually a baby chimp that they're like carrying around.
Yeah.
And Hassline tensely sort of spots them with his binoculars and follows them into this rusty old ship, eventually locating Zira and Milo. And again, this whole sequence like changes to like a 70s political thriller almost in terms of the way that they're shooting it.
Oh yeah, like voyeurism and things like that. Like they're doing these huge wide shots following them go from level to level on the ships and everything. It's very much like it's
kind of unbearable. You're like, oh my God, I really hope Dr. Hassline does not find these characters. And they even set up the moment where he like opens up his box looking for his binoculars and they show that he has a gun in there and you're like, oh Jesus Christ, what's he going to do with that? Mm-hmm. And of course, even then, the first time I watched this, I did not expect what they actually do, which is that full out Dirty Harry style, Dr. Hassline executes or tries to. He gets actually so distracted trying to execute the baby that he actually doesn't fully execute Zira. He shoots Zira. The baby falls out of her arms as she's falling, and he literally Dirty Harry's the fucking bundle of the fucking blanket with the baby in it, and you literally see the bullets go into the baby. Oh yeah, and you're like, what the fuck?
It's wild. Again, this is just because we've talked about all the comedic aspects of this and really getting to know these characters on a much deeper level than you do in the previous films. Seeing that kind of image is just it's harrowing and it's very shocking. Also, like using a real chimp as baby Milo for so long establishes this like just this real groundedness, this reality. And so when you see the shot of him just getting lit up, it is so visceral. And I was not expecting it whatsoever. And then you have just to add a little bit of almost confusion in a way onto the pain is you see Zira take that body of the baby and then toss it over the side into the water, and for a moment you're kind of like, whoa, what is this? That felt kind of cold, you know. There is a reveal, of course, of why that kind of happens in a way, but it's just there's so many moments here that are incredibly dark. Like watching Cornelius, who's reacting to Zira getting shot, he gets shot.
Use his gun to shoot Hassline and get revenge, and Hassline's corpse falling into the water while all the police snipers on the sideline start shooting Cornelius down, and Cornelius Zira crawling over to Cornelius's body to just die in his arms. You're like, Jesus Christ!
They do this wild bird's eye view shot of a dummy version, I guess, of Cornelius falling, and then just you see the full impact of of his dead body hitting the ground, and you hear a thud and everything. Like there's just, it's so cold. It's unbelievably cold.
Yeah.
I don't know.
Well, and I think it really sends home, you know, like the kind of the message of the movie too, which is that, you know, when it goes full sort of 70s paranoid thriller, it is a symbol of like mankind and the government becoming so afraid of, you know, oh my God, we're going to become so cruelly dominated by these like savage apes. This is so horrifying. And in order to prevent that from happening, this guy literally turns into like a ruthless murderer in order to pull that off, where he's shooting a fucking baby. And like, it's so wild to see like a character so convinced and so afraid of what might happen to him that he's willing to like become this very monstrous character. And I think it really works also because I find I really like, obviously I love the previous two movies. And I think they do this really successfully, but their endings do operate on like a very broad existential nihilism of like, what if the entire Earth was destroyed? What if mankind annihilated itself in a kind of more philosophical way almost? Yeah. And with this one, it's a really, really emotional, character-driven context for the bleak ending of this, which is that these two characters clearly love each other. They, you know, they want to have a child and they want to, you know, be part of humanity. And we know them as actually the pacifist characters from the Planet of the Apes who actually,
the ones that would
you know,
be ingrained into
didn't
society.
mistreat humans or, you know, like actually cared for Taylor. And to see them just treated very, very similarly. Like imagine if the first Planet of the Apes ended with just Charlton Heston getting fucking executed by the apes. Like when you think about it in that way, it's like this even it is again they're constantly finding ways to pile on the miserable qualities of all of this. Like we're talking about a dude fucking dirty harrying a fucking baby chimp. It's so mean, it's almost kind of funny.
Yeah, it is. It's wildly mean spirited. And I think one of the last things that Zira says, and it's just so true once you see this last 10 minutes, is like, I think she says, we've met hundreds, meaning humans, we've met hundreds since I've been here, and I trust 3. And I think that's a great line. It's like, I agree. I think that ratio is about correct. But yeah,
it's also pretty similar to Heston. Yeah.
Yes. Yeah. Very true. Very true. But yeah, right there, it's just kind of like in that moment before everything does become the doomed ending we know and love from this series. She's already recognizing that, you know, even if they were to assimilate and they were to grow up in this society and have their baby grow up in this society, that there would still be a resistance constantly from people, because even with all of this time, all this exposure, you know, they're basically world famous at this point, and there's still this much resistance. It just feels like, you know, she's almost, I don't know if given up would be the term, but it feels like she's definitely more pessimistic than when she arrived.
Yeah, so much so that they, in another, I guess, sort of twist ending moment where we find out why she dumped the baby into the water so that they couldn't find its body. We find out that they were so pessimistic and kind of believed that they were, you know, walking into their own deaths in the first place, that they anticipated that and actually swapped out the normal chimp baby that they met at the circus while they were giving birth to Milo. And so they essentially just got like another chimp murdered, and Milo is still alive and hanging out with the animal lover circus owner who will protect and raise him, meaning that Hasline's brutal crimes, where he's like, you know, I'm sacrificing my personal morality and I'm going to kill this baby to save the world, totally in vain.
Yeah. And also the switch. Also, I feel like I clocked the switch when she walked into the cage, like when she says like, oh, I wanted to spend some time with the mother and child. I was like, oh, okay, I think I know what's going to happen.
Oh yeah.
And I feel like it made the whole experience of her, like when she has the baby and they're kind of on the run, the actual chimp baby, not the intelligent one, she kind of keeps going, like trying to coax it into talking, going like, mama, say mama. And I feel like that's so like, you know, upsetting. It's like, oh my God, she just like gave up her child. She basically knows she's sacrificing her life to save her child, I think, on some level. And she's kind of like in this weird, like it's not clear if she's trying to just keep up appearances that this is her baby. or
it's like
like
she
if she's,
misses the
actually
baby.
trying to coax this, like, see, is it possible for this chimp to like, gain the power of language if I am just like, yeah, I don't know. There's something about it. It's really, it's weird.
Yeah, definitely. And having the intelligent chimpanzee say "mom" at the end would imply that it's probably been saying it. So I think that could easily imply that she's doing this thing where it's almost like she misses that baby. She misses that voice. So she's trying to coax it out of the real chimp. And that, I didn't even think of that in the context of things. And that is pretty heartbreaking. And also
really dark.
I did say before that she hadn't given up, but now I'm rethinking it. It seems as if she had to have, because if they already knew that this was going to happen, they did the switch, then they basically knew that they'd be getting killed.
Yeah,
So,
I feel like, because I feel like the switch is like, on a story level, it's either that she knows it's that she knows she's either going to be killed and her baby is going to be killed with her, and she wants some hope for her child to survive, or she thinks there's a chance that she can escape. And then she's like, just sacrificing her child anyway,
Right.
like, or at least keep it. You know what I mean? She's never
keeping
gonna
it
see
in a
that kid
safer
again.
place.
Yeah.
Where it will at least be taken care of and, kind of underground, under wraps a little bit.
It's such a depressing decision. And it's obviously it's not, it's for the good of the baby, of course, but it is just so it is completely heartbreaking, and it is crazy that it's kind of. It retroactively settles in. I feel like with the twist ending, you're like, oh, she switched it, which means that she made this decision earlier in the movie, which means that this is like.
Meanwhile, and she might she's making these decisions while we're watching this more lighthearted comedy in a sense.
Totally,
Like she's discovering all these
We're
horrible
laughing about Ricardo
atrocities.
Montalban and how weird he is.
Yeah,
and
we're
she's
just like, man, doesn't Cornelius look sick in his suit? This is great. I'm having a great time.
Yeah, but a friend of the pod, Branson Brees, had a very funny review of this movie where he described the Armando as "Mamma mia, I've always loved a noble chimpanzee." That's functionally his entire character, and again, it's one of those things where it is a bit of a bait and switch. Like they do a good job of kind of throwing those moments in there, building the actual context where characters would make harrowing decisions like these, and then actually delivering on them, which is why I definitely think why it is people ended up kind of preferring it to Beneath, even though I obviously really like Beneath. I admit that in terms of figuring out where they were going to go scripted wise, they were unhinged and I don't know, we're just gonna it's not as constructed as this in terms of characterization. Yeah. Where that main guy who is the second Heston, he's kind of just a witness character who doesn't do a whole lot. And in this one, it's Zira and Cornelius, it's not just weaponizing the fact that you like them. It is actually further developing them and putting them into a complicated situation that you understand, where they have to make heartbreaking decisions and they have to, have these things. And honestly, we're in a position similar to the first one where you understand a little bit where the antagonist is coming from, and you don't agree with dirty harrying a fucking baby chimp, but you you understand the mechanics of how he got to that decision.
Right. Yeah. You think, I guess maybe if I discovered that in the future the Earth would be no more, I could understand being driven completely crazy by that. And I maybe couldn't imagine.
But dude, I would be like, dude, I've watched a movie before. Dude, in 1971, there was movies, and he should have seen a couple. And in those movies, he would have seen, well, actually, by doing these things, am I just going to make this happen? Yeah. Which, man, come on. That's how it always works. And so it is even brutal for him. The fact that he just so becomes this brutal killer, and it ends up being that, they got the baby out of his way anyway, doing the little swap that they did. So none of it mattered that he ended up, doing these horrible crimes to these characters that we love. And we watched an innocent baby chimp who is completely unrelated to the entire story just get annihilated by a pistol,
being held by his mother. Oh my god,
he was just bored.
That poor fucking R.I.P.
Welcome to the world, little man.
Yeah, rip to second Milo. That's a bummer, dude.
Yeah, but maybe pivoting towards the reductive rating round on this one. Yeah, I mean, similarly to Beneath, this one gets maybe a little bit of a stronger 4 than Beneath, which ended up getting kind of a little bit of the lighter 4 for me. I think Well, I don't know. They might be a little bit even for me. I think that beneath its highs in terms of the subterranean mutant stuff and the actual action sequencing of that, like the gorillas like actually storming on horseback, and you get the giant like war shot of them, and you get them actually breaching the underground, and the fucking telepaths like committing suicide so they don't get tortured. And Jesus, there's so much crazy shit in that movie. And this one I do think is a little bit more low key. Again, it is a more sort of dialogue heavy film, especially in the early goings. But I think that the political and moral situation that they put all of these characters in is consistently compelling. Like from Zira and Cornelius' perspective, from Dr. Hassline's perspective, from the human version of Zira and Cornelius's perspective, everyone I think is wrestling with something and has some dimension to their character. I do enjoy the fact that this is a goofy and sweet, like fish out of water movie for so much of it, of just what if talking ape celebrities existed in the 1970s and were wearing tailored suits and watching TV and getting wine drunk. And there's a lot of fun to be had with that aspect that lulls you into a false sense of safety, of almost like you're not watching a Planet of the Apes movie. But as always, it turns out that you are. And so, as soon as I got to the brutal sort of final reel of this movie, I kind of understood why it was that people latched onto it at the time. Totally. And the fact that it does go full like 70s paranoid thriller with fucking shootouts and fucking baby chimps getting shot. It is absolute, and developing the emotional and political context and kind of momentum of its very upsetting ending is something that I think this one does even maybe a little bit better than the previous two, even though obviously the first movie is untouchable for me. But yeah, and I will say too, I think a huge difference maker here is really focusing on McDowell and Hunter's performances. Like, I think they're so charismatic and so expressive underneath that makeup, and having these very honest dilemmas that they're in, and having these kind of intimate relationships. And yeah, there's a lot of stuff going on there that I think it does really well. So solid 4 for me.
Yeah, I think I think I'm going to agree. I think it's a 4 for me as well. I wasn't sure when I ended it. It felt very different, I guess, compared to the first two. I guess with the second one, like we said, it has that first 40-45 minutes. It's almost a rehash of the first one. So it's still kind of lined up with a very familiar formula. Whereas this one, it's mixing like sitcom stuff with political thrillers with voyeuristic shots, and it's just it's so all over the place, but honestly still very cohesive. Like it doesn't feel there's jarring moments, but it doesn't feel out of place for the story that they're telling.
No, as far as having like probably a couple weeks to write yourself out of the hole of having blown up the planet and killed every single character in the previous movie, could someone have done a better job?
I don't think
of scripting a way out of that. I don't know if you can.
I really was.
This might be one of the craziest Hollywood franchise rescue jobs ever written.
Yeah, like I said at the beginning, I really had no clue how they were going to do it, and my brain just went to like who was not on screen when the world blew up. And I think it's very smart to focus in on Zira and Cornelius specifically, because they are the most like likable characters. Even with Heston involved, they're still the more likable characters in some sense. So yeah, I think it's great to focus on them. The character work is really incredible, very lovable performances, and it kind of directly connects to the like inevitable doomed ending that we're going to get. So I think that mixing those two things works so well once you get to the full picture. And one last thing I wanted to mention was, I just thought it was funny that guy died so like easily. We were kind of laughing about that. It's also funny that before he does that, he's doing it condescendingly, but he's kind of like trying to be likable in some sense. He's like, hey, does your baby need some food? I think you should eat a little something, maybe drink a little orange juice, huh? And then he just gets killed. And I don't know, that to me is very funny. So just wanted to mention it. So yeah, 4 out of 5.
Yeah. For me, I probably go, I think 3.5 out of 5.
Nice.
I think it's I don't know. Yeah, I do think I like Beneath more than this, which I feel like is maybe a little bit. I can totally understand why someone would take umbrage with that, but there's just I love the mode of like I there's something, I guess, in this of just being sad that we're not on the future planet anymore, the kind of wasteland with the nuke worshipping mutants and like all this stuff. I just really love that world, and I love how over the top and I love the tone of it, and we get, I think, a completely different tone here, and I really like this movie a lot, and I think I think it's like just unbelievably competently written for what it is, and I mean, it's all the tone is like so well done. I think it's great. I just wish that there was mutants in it, man.
It does remind me, I think I said it in our last episode, but just watching more of these entries in the franchise reminds me of just Godzilla, in the sense that they do all these tonal changes. Like each Godzilla movie kind of has its own thing going on in some weird way. You're going to have stuff you expect, obviously, with a monster or two monsters fighting each other or whatever, but there's always like, sometimes it's more comedic, sometimes it's more fantasy based, sometimes it's more action, sometimes it's more political. Yeah. And this feels
every
like
once in a while they throw you a Hedorah and you're like, what the fuck is happening?
Exactly.
Yeah. Well, I will say, and I think we're going to, argue this when we move on to Conquest here, but I do think that the Planet of the Apes has to be one of just the most like consistent franchises that ever, considering they did it over like 5 years and they were speed running through them and slashing budgets every time they did one. The fact that these movies are as good as they are is actually kind of still shocking.
Yeah, I totally agree. And for the sequels, for me, personally anyway, they get better and better. At least they have for me. I haven't seen Battle, and I guess that one will be the exception. But
you might need to hold off on that theory until you've watched Battle. But I think the common wisdom is that that Beneath is, for a lot of people, one of the weaker ones, and then Escape gets a little bit better, and then I think most people do tend to agree, at least from people I follow, that Conquest is the strongest one. And we're going to be talking about that right now. So let's jump into it. We're going to be right back, and we're going to be talking about Conquest of the Planet of the Apes. Stick around.
People will plot and plan for the inevitable day of man's downfall. And that day is upon you now!
I was saying this to a buddy earlier at work today, where I was like, it is kind of fucked up that we didn't get, like, because people got so aped out because they shoved them down their throats so quickly, we were denied like the Apes movies coming out in like a post franchise world of like the like post Indiana Jones and like post Star Wars, and like there's like, think about the crazy Hollywood like 1980s Planet of the Apes with those special effects that we were denied because everyone got aped out by 1974.
Full on head explosions with apes. Oh my god,
incredible. Like, and the makeup, like, just, by the time the gore makeup guys and creature makeup guys of the 80s were around, it's such a travesty we weren't making Apes movies. I should have saved that for the actual conversation at the end here, but it was just something I was thinking about earlier, and I was like, man, that's fucked up.
Yeah. Oh my god. We can spin right into it if you want. I'll just include that.
Yeah. Why not? Let's do it. Let's talk about it. We are talking Conquest of the Planet of the Apes, the 1972 American science fiction film directed by J. Lee Thompson, written once again by Paul Den, and this time starring Roddy McDowall once again, but this time as an ape named Caesar, the grown-up baby Milo of Zira and Cornelius, who we saw at the end, raised by the Italian circus owner Armando, where we jump ahead to 1991 to witness the events of Cornelius's monologue, where the pandemic killed all cats and dogs and turned apes into pets and slave labor, and Caesar becomes something of a revolutionary civil rights leader against their human oppressors in a violent uprising. And here we are 1 year later, another Apes movie. Escape made quite a bit less money than the previous ones, but it got much better reviews than Beneath did. Apes fatigue might have been starting to set in, but the producers were not unmotivated. They were like, Paul Den, who did a great job writing that last screenplay, as we were just saying, and he perfectly teed up, because he realized what they did accidentally when they wrote Beneath, which was not give them any space to go and develop and do anything. So with this one, they realized Escape did tee up sequels that, you know, they could not see go undeveloped. So they brought Paul Dehn back once again, and they asked him to script a follow-up following the narrative points that were established in Escape and bringing them full circle with the original in case they were to not make any more sequels. They did end up making one more, Battle, but they originally, when they were asking him to write this, they said, if this is the last one, make it make sense, as if it goes back to the first one somehow. Like, this was the circular one in their opinion. And so they wanted him to do that, but they also wanted him, because I think they felt some of the lack of commercial appeal of Escape was that it was a very talky, satirical movie. And they kind of went, we want to bring some of that action spectacle back. And in order to do that, they hired legendary British playwright turned social realist turned Hollywood action filmmaker, director J. Lee Thompson, who in the 1960s generated a lot of acclaim for directing the Men on a Mission war epic, The Guns of Navarone, and the spectacularly inky and sweaty and voyeuristic stalker thriller called Cape Fear with Gregory Peck and Robert Mitchum. He also directed, too, in the 60s that I don't know if this one made money and maybe wasn't why they hired him, but he did this bizarre, like, gothic occult horror film, too, called Eye of the Devil that I would recommend people check out. Awesome. He had a very weird career where he got, like, started in the 30s or 40s, like Hitchcock era, and then ended up making it all the way to the exploitation era in the 80s, where the dude made straight up, like, 80s horror films and also Charles Bronson canon films like Death Wish 4 and
Let's go.
For the Charles Bronson heads, he made 10 to Midnight, which is the one where he hunts down a sex crime serial killer and he's like waving a dildo in the killer's face in the interrogation room, being like, "What do you do with this? Do you jack off with it?"
Just not understanding a dildo. Very funny.
It's wonderful. And I would also recommend for anyone who just wants to watch a bad Charles Bronson movie that has ridiculous sequences in it, The Evil That Men Do, which is the one where Bronson goes down to Latin American dictatorships, and he literally strangles a dude by the dick. Like full two-hand grip, squeezes it until the dude passes out. I've never seen anything else like it in a movie, and J. Lee Thompson directed that. So what a sick career this guy had. Apparently, too, he was actually considered for the original film and the first sequels as well. That it was a scheduling conflict that resulted in that not happening. But like, he was pretty big already by 1968, and he was before Schaffner. They were looking at him and finally just got him in 1972 now. When unfortunately, I will say, they were slashing budgets at this point. We talked about that with Beneath. We didn't really mention it with Escape, but because I think Escape had a similar budget to Beneath. So they at least maintained there. But this was another slash, because that first Planet of the Apes is nearly a $6 million movie. Yeah. At this point, J. Lee Thompson was working with less than $2 million. Right. Even though they were working with like a hit franchise that was making money and pumping one a year. It was just, I think Fox was in such a bad state because of other movies that they were like, we have a sure hit. Let's keep milking this and keep lowering the budget. And I will say, where I kind of wanted to start with Conquest is, I don't think that you would know that it's a less expensive
I was going to say, I would have
Escape.
Maybe guessed that it was more expensive. I feel like they're like, they do a lot with a little, and also especially coming off of Escape, where it's all, you know, like they're not really doing very much crazy production design stuff at all, and then you come here and it's like fucking Star Wars interiors, and they have like flamethrowers like 5 separate times.
And the amount of people in ape costume in this is insane at a certain point. They take such advantage of showing that it's kind of like an entire prison community. So a lot of the time it's the camera is just moving through these huge open spaces while apes are doing different things, whether they be, you know, doing labor for the prison or being a slave for somebody or whatever it is.
Multiple real chimpanzees too. Like they really, it really does feel like they went all out.
Yeah, I was going to say, well, how they got around that, like making the makeup less expensive still, was because they didn't have to have full-on scenes of very expressive acting happening underneath the makeup. So they just literally put like ape masks on people and were like, yeah, put on a fucking jumpsuit and ape mask and then just go jump around in the distance.
Yeah,
and it's
so now
like,
you have
so you didn't
200
even though there's a lot more people in costume, they didn't have to do as hefty work as they did realizing Zira and Cornelius as such three-dimensional characters that they did in Escape. But that's also just smart. Like that's smart decision making on behalf of where to spend your money, how to maximize the visuals with what you have, because in this case, the production design is good, but also a lot of this is location work. It's shot in Century City. It's shot at, I forget which LA university, but they literally, most of the concrete and sort of skyscraper and glass exteriors are just like actual real world locations that they blocked off and had a bunch of extras in ape costumes running around in. So they didn't actually need to spend much money. And then they do the rest just through energetic and stylized directing. Like I think J. Lee Thompson is the difference here. It's just like the way that he uses the futuristic like architecture, the way that he uses the action sequencing that he ends up doing. There's a very propulsive kind of angry energy to the whole thing. It's really well staged. There's good uses of color. There's mood. There's shadow and fire to it. I mean, all the imagery that evokes like this like civil rights riot kind of stuff and this actual sort of like Nazi police state kind of stuff. And it's also, it's worth noting, shot by Bruce Surtees this time, who was Don Siegel and Clint Eastwood's director of photography, the guy who literally shot Dirty Harry and but also like High Plains Drifter, the outfit, Escape from Alcatraz, which I think actually has some similar uses of like prison architecture and stuff. It's a really fantastically shot movie that makes it look way more expensive than Escape, despite literally costing half the money.
They did such a great job with the location stuff too. I mean, it really does. You can definitely kind of tell that these are just real world buildings, but it fully feels like a world. Like it's all tied together.
Orwellian dystopia, like retro sci-fi almost.
It feels so absurd and real, and like just little details like the statues of the dogs and cats to like commemorate the dog and cat plague is like so lived in and weird and like off kilter. It's like great. It really does. I think this totally, I mean, I was talking about with Escape kind of, I wasn't getting the itch scratched so much of like, this is a sci-fi world. I'm just looking at, I'm looking at the 70s and there just happen to be two apes there, but here it's fully like, this is a full new like thing that they've created. And it's so engrossing and fun to be there. Yeah. Even though it's an evil world.
And I agree. I think that like the architecture of the location that they mostly just stay in has, I guess you said it was a university. There's something about
I was like, it's almost a single location movie. Yeah, like it's so funny when you think like they shoot it in so many great ways, like including daytime stuff and some nighttime stuff with this use of shadow that change it. But yeah, it is functionally like two interiors and an exterior, and they really, really make it seem like it's way bigger than that.
Yeah, and everything just has this jaggedness to it. Like everything's gray. It just feels like it's colorless, and so it kind of feels like they're in this prison environment. And they also do a lot of handheld camera work, especially the action sequence, a lot of it. And then they do it a lot.
They went back to the original with like actually bringing in that really, really chaotic and claustrophobic kind of, when the ape on human violence that this one eventually builds to, especially. Yeah.
And when you have Caesar looking at people or the ape specifically as slaves, like they do a lot of these close-ups of, the enslaved chimpanzee doing some type of activity, labor, and then they go back to his face and he has the more expressive masking. And so he can kind of just, you actively see him take in this world and actively see him become the rebellious person that he's going to become.
Yeah. And also creating a context where like you also completely understand why that character needs to become that too. Because like the opening scene, especially, I think it like right off the bat, you are like a bunch of human guards like violently running this Orwellian dystopia, like ape management training facility where they teach apes how to do various sort of slave custodial labor, shoe shining, mopping, window washing, hairdressing, table waiting. And they do this like at the end of a billy club and via intense like psychological torture conditioning. And the way that the camera even follows them being herded around in their prison jumpsuits in a way that like resembles a militarized police state, and the way that you would be watching like documentary footage or like just someone handheld capturing just the brutality of the way characters are treated is it really does, you know, start you in a really, really dark place, which is obviously so different than Escape, which starts you in this more like goofy and fun place and kind of lulls you in. And this one has more of it still builds to a shocking ending, but it builds to one where you're like, well, naturally this is where we were going to get to, which also makes it, you know, kind of scary in its own way, where we're introduced to Caesar, played by Roddy McDowall, who's flown into the city by his Italian circus owner, Ormondo, who was played by the same actor in the first film, Ricardo Montalban. And they arrive in the city to distribute these flyers for their circus that they were, that he's been living in for the last 20 years. And he's been raising Caesar there. And in order to protect him, he needs to actually leash him around, making him behave like a primitive mute ape so as not to reveal that he can talk, and expose himself as the child of Zira and Cornelius and be murdered on sight like they were, since his existence, obviously the humans are still incredibly afraid of it, could lead to the world being dominated by apes. Not somehow realizing that their cruelty and enslavement of apes could somehow be speeding up that process, which it is quite literally doing. But I like that when we're first introduced with Caesar, it is like how belittled he almost feels to have to behave like a pet and to like be only able to wear clothes via special permit, and to see all his fellow apes just so monstrously mistreated by the ape control, who are these officers literally dressed like Nazis, like cattle prodding them around the city and finding the masters of all the bad and lazy ones who are disobedient, and, you know, eventually getting so fed up with it that he actually involuntarily shouts at them. He's like, "Lousy human bastards," which I will say Roddy McDowall's performance in this is insane. And I do love every time he speaks, he only speaks in very kind of targeted moments. I don't know, Roddy McDowall has just kind of a goofy voice, and hearing him so articulately say something so angry like that, you understand the shock of all the human characters. We're like, who fucking said, did that fucking chimp say that? What the fuck?
Something was off about that.
It's totally it's great too to have the juxtaposition of him playing Cornelius into this other character is so it really is, it feels crazy.
It's
a very different performance. Like, credit to fucking Roddy McDowall. There's no guy who could like it. It
feels.
I mean, through all the movies, it's unbelievable the performances they give under those like masks. It's truly insane, and this is, I think, no different. Even as the masks get, cheaper as the budgets get slashed, like it's crazy that the whole time you'll watch the whole movie and you'll still be looking at him and be like, oh yeah, that's a guy.
Yeah, having Roddy McDowall do it almost feels like, like Cornelius's spirit, his soul came out when he was shot and killed.
That's right. That was what they said. Caesar. They were like, dude, you're Cornelius's son. It's fine. Yeah. He's going to be it's going to be like Cornelius, but also his performance is very different. So credit to him.
Oh yeah. There's a huge difference in character. Like, you can actually tell the difference between him playing Cornelius and Caesar, I think. And again, they have masks that are pretty similar, so to be able to do that and still give me a different feeling like while you're playing these characters that are father and son, so they would even reflect each other a lot. It's a testament to how good he is in this. It's really, really impressive.
This is maybe jumping ahead a little bit, but this reminded me of one very funny moment in this when the like evil dictator guy is like trying to find Caesar or like trying to find the son of Cornelius, and he holds up he's interrogating Ricardo Montalban, and he holds up a picture of Cornelius and then a line drawing of like a chimpanzee from the circus poster. Don't you see the resemblance? It's like, I don't think so, but I guess.
Speaking, just because this actually connects right back to that scene we were just talking about, but it's a comedic beat like that where basically the Nazi guards hear him say the lousy human bastards, and so he goes and interrogates both Caesar and what's his name again, Armando. Yes, Armando. And so they're like, well, if you said it, then like say it, and so that we can be convinced that was the voice that we heard. And so he starts to say it, and he does it with like really extreme bravado and like just nails it. And they're like, Okay, no, that could have been him that said that for sure.
It could have been him.
I thought that was
it
so
could have been
funny.
it might not have been a chimp. It might have just been an Italian man.
And then they push it further, and where they like add another layer to this like bizarre interrogation thing where they're like have him in a room and he's like, no, you don't understand. I said lousy inhuman bastards.
Yes.
I was being racist.
Yeah.
I'm like you guys. I swear.
Him trying to like take the blame and saying that, you know, he was the one who said to try to, you know, diffuse the situation and, you know, and making Caesar also, you know, hide among the mute apes while he deals with this entire sort of interrogation process in order to kind of smooth over this situation. Like the fact that results in a sequence where Armando is like, similarly to Zira in the last film, is put under this like truth-telling authenticator device to like prevent him from lying on behalf of, because like we're gonna get the truth out of you. And once again, you obviously feel a little squirmy about that. But the fact that he instead of like Zira, who's obviously so drugged and just kind of revealing things, not realizing what she's doing, Armando is more aware, because it's almost like the machine is like pulling it out of him against his will entirely.
Yeah.
And realizing that he might tell the truth and implicate Caesar and get Caesar in trouble or get him exposed about what he is, he just fucking chooses to jump out of the office window, killing himself.
Yeah.
You're like, holy shit. The severity of the treatment of apes is definitely like really, really escalated in this film to a degree that it was implied in Escape from the Planet of the Apes, but like they really do want to extend how much death. And obviously, we partly what Cameron was talking about too in the last bit, where he was like, you know, I think that this fucking fascist governor character is way more like, I don't think you could even slightly sympathize with him. He's just a hateful guy, and he like to a goofy degree.
He has that same fear that the Doctor does in the third movie, but there's no sense of.
But it's developed over 20 years.
Yeah, exactly. It just he's so stern the whole time. He's completely stoic. It's just pure evil on screen. It doesn't have a lot of nuance in that regard.
He even has goofy looking fascist underlings, like the Culp guy played by Severn Darden, which if you guys end up watching Battle, he ends up becoming the governor for Battle and like leads like a Mad Max army against Caesar of humans who like survived Conquest. It's kind of ridiculous, but he's a fun character.
And Cameron already mentioned it, but like they straight up look like, especially in their communications room and all of that, like they're the Empire from Star Wars. Like they have just such a fascist look to them inherently, like just ingrained into their style and aesthetic. So these guys have really, you kind of, again, with the third one, not even speaking on the Doctor, you understand in some regard where the fears of the humans would come from, just because they could see themselves being enslaved, and that was a scary thought. But with this, because you're seeing so much torture and abuse heading towards the chimps, that and then you're presented. These are the humans that you're presented with. It's just there's no room for that kind of that nuance.
These guys want to see all apes like tyrannically crushed and kept in their place, and is worried like about minor acts of defiance that are cropping up around the city. And it's his more kind and sympathetic assistant McDonald, played by Harry Rhodes, who is the one human character who's kind of arguing in favor of ape rights, is considered a bleeding heart for being like a black guy who might be perhaps sensitive to the idea of slavery. Like they actually bring it up in dialogue multiple times. We're like, sorry,
it's so crazy
whatever.
That they literally call him a bleeding heart. Like, I'm not a bleeding heart like you. Yeah, and like and it's like he's still, again, he's same as all the other movies. He's still doing the shit. Like he's still
he's like assistant to the governor.
He's very much like the Dr. Lewis character. Although he does like speak up a little bit more often and challenge his governor, where he does like actually debunk like some of his hysterical and like politically motivated claims. Like one of the big ones is that, you know, ape violence is on the rise, and it's all based on like one headline case where a gorilla was brutally gunned down trying to escape one of the conditioning facilities. facilities. And you literally have McDonald be like, well, I mean, that gorilla was obviously provoked by intense abuse. He's going through the paperwork. He's like, he had bruises and cuts like all over his body. And this was a sequence worth noting that was actually shot for the film and intended as the cold open for the film, but it was considered so graphic and upsetting that it got the film an R rating. And this was designed to be a G-rated franchise. And it's worth noting, this was the first one to get the PG.
What?
Which is actually a little astonishing to me, because I think that first one is kind of just as violent. But I mean, I guess maybe the blood was enough that they were like,
Yeah.
you know,
Yeah.
well, you have to consider the PG-13 rating didn't exist. It was PG or R.
True. Yeah, that's a good point. But even I would say, like, so this was the first one that's PG, because I would still put PG in Beneath and Escape, just given Escape because of the ending, and then Beneath because of the. I mean, there's blood. There's straight up squibs in Beneath, and people getting shotgunned and shit.
People are
machine
crucified.
gun.
Apes are crucified upside down and Beneath. And the first one,
And screaming while burning upside down.
From their feet. Like,
Dude,
Yeah.
That's awesome. I'm glad the rating system was so just like, let the kids watch it.
Crazy.
Let's go.
Yeah, I'm looking it up. All 3 previous Apes films were rated G. This was the first one rated PG, and it almost got the R. Now, I also think part of the reason this one almost got the R was because it was so, even in comparison to the previous ones, this one was so involving itself in the, you know, sort of civil rights themes.
Yeah.
Sure.
I think that was the main thing that was really upsetting, because this was also the first one that had an ending so bleak, and we'll talk about it. They actually had a different ending for the theatrical cut that was really poorly and haphazardly thrown together.
Yeah. I actually think
it's funny, and it's funny to think about, because you're like, all the 3 previous movies had horribly bleak endings. This one's really not more bleak, really, but I think it was just maybe a little bit more challenging and didn't test as
this
well.
is an ending that could actually mean something to a group of people, maybe.
Yeah.
Yes.
Yeah, exactly.
This could maybe get
And you have all these, there's the stuff in the very beginning. This is in the first 20 minutes, I think, when Caesar actually goes into the prison system and he sees it's basically nonstop abuse and torture under disco lights for some reason. And it's like there's a
for some reason. Oh, dude, I know exactly what. That's the one thing I know what it was for. I still don't know exactly what the whole flamethrower for a banana thing was about. I'm not exactly sure what that was training them to do.
Yeah,
but the one under the disco ball, I was
chefs. It's so they could condition
That's right.
the fire.
Yep.
Yeah, well,
what it is.
That is what
They have
it
a
is.
setup where the ape is like a hibachi style chef and lights the grill or whatever, and it flames up and he runs away. And they're like, you're supposed to condition the fire. And then they cut. Then they show them
classic hibachi technique for training.
Oh my god, that's so funny. Well, the other one, it's to get them into loud music and psychedelic club lighting so that they can deliver drinks and wait tables and
right.
nightclubs and stuff like that.
Right. Yeah, you're absolutely right. It's
yeah, the abuse of training facility sequence is absolutely
easy. It's great.
It's unhinged. It's like full torture dungeon rooms where they're going to make them good workers in society. One of my favorite ones is they're teaching them just how to pour drinks.
Yeah.
Just pour glasses of water for your master.
It's also so great that they give they have the kind of command phraseology where they say they will do something and they say do. Then if an ape messes up, they say no, and it's so viscerally demeaning. For them to say do, not even do this or go, do is you're this animal's intelligence is so low that I'm not even going to bother to use my own correct grammar. I would say do.
Yeah. I mean, one of the good things about that I do sort of enjoy about Battle is that actually, because it's a really good point that you bring up, that the way that they command them in such a an inhuman way like that, it's actually lives on in Battle, and in Battle it's the apes and the humans are trying to kind of live intermingled, and they have human teachers teaching the apes actually how to speak English and things like that. And there's one point where the really, really kind teacher at one point is ridiculing one of the, not ridiculing, but I guess giving criticism to one of the gorillas who failed one of his tests. And the guy kind of gets violent, and the teacher at one point goes, no. And you can see every ape in the vicinity is like immediately like triggered to being like, what the fuck did he just say?
Yeah.
You know, like that actually had lasting psychological damages. So it's so funny that you brought that up. That's like yeah, it's exactly what it's designed to do.
It totally works. I mean, it really does make you feel so horrible. Like just like, it's crazy that it's such a small thing that is like, this is literally, all the government officials are like modeled after the Nazis. We have like all this, like it is so on the surface evil society. And then just something
we're trying
like
to
that,
reconstruct their brain chemistry so that when they hear no, they get an electrocuted shock.
Yeah.
There's
It's
something,
wild.
I just think this world that they create in this movie is so great and so like it fully propels you through the whole movie. You understand why everything has to happen the way it does. It feels like you're watching, like, you know, the way that they kind of they talk about this creation myth in or like quote unquote, I guess revolution myth more in Escape, and then they do it in this. It really does feel like you are watching like some kind of legend. Like it is just such a crazy world. And one of my favorite, I think my favorite line in the whole movie is near the beginning where it's like these two ladies are eating lunch and one of them is smoking a cigarette and she says, "Funny, now that I know these things won't kill me, I don't enjoy them." Which is like on its face, like it's just like I feel like a throwaway little like oh, it's the future, we cured cancer or whatever, and then like also like it's just a funny little joke, but it's also like I feel like so like this is like they're living in a full like fascist slaver society. They're being waited on by like intelligent creatures, and she's sitting here thinking about like, boy, I wish my like the thing that I do to engage my hands when I'm bored would still kill me. This is how like disconnected and like just complacent.
Followed
and,
by
like,
the like gag image of a gorilla waiter, like, you know, supposed to be lighting her cigarette for her.
It's such a crazy juxtaposition of this is a pure fascist evil society, and I'm sitting here like, oh, I wish that my cigarette still would give me cancer, is like so just crazy. I love it. It's so well done.
Yeah. The human beings in this movie are just completely unhinged. Like even briefly going back to the prison or the training location, everything is so chaotic, like, and disorganized. You'd think that there'd be lines of apes and they would be, you know, systematically putting them through some type of testing or whatever, but it's just chaos. Like literally there's hundreds of apes just running around getting abused, but there's no organization. There's like little, you know, stations maybe, but there's a total lack of any
but they get from one to the other like an obstacle course.
Yeah, it's just madness basically. And then another design thing that I liked that is just kind of it's adding insult to injury, I guess, is they have this electronic fence system for their cells, so they can actually see an opening in their door the entire time, but it's just invisible. So if they try to pass it, they get an electric shock, and it just seems like a taunting piece of architecture, you know. But yeah, the human beings in this movie are just evil and unhinged, basically.
Yeah, well, and I like Roddy McDowall being forced to react to them. Like I think his performance is really good in that section where he obviously has to be incredibly perturbed, obviously, at everything that he's seeing, because, you know, he's been grown up by a guy who loved the chimpanzee. Mm-hmm. You know, it's one of those things, and now he's like, wow, this is how all of us are treated. I've been kind of living a very privileged life in comparison to all of these guys, and you know, but he also needs to pretend to like be a stupid monkey to avoid suspicion. So he's like faking kind of like being confused that he like doesn't know how to wash his hands and needs to be taught and like make a bed and pour drink, do all this handiwork that he's doing. And he ends up sort of progressing along so well in terms of obedience and skill. He ends up becoming one of the hottest ticket items at the auction and becomes the evil Governor Breck's personal servant.
Also, what's pretty cool is that you see him kind of almost encouraging the rest of the prisoners to take on these tasks at a certain point and learn these mechanics. And the human beings are happy about it because they're like, oh, sweet, our slaves are getting better at being slaves. And the apes are thinking, actually, we're getting stronger here. We're learning how to hold the gun, how to hold the hammer, how to hold the knife, how to, you know, whatever. And I thought that was a cool thing that they start to develop, especially with Caesar honing in on certain apes as he interacts with them. I guess
the governor is the only one who expresses fear of that stuff because he's actually he knows that he suspects that the talking ape of Zira and Cornelius's son has survived, and that the entire sort of the enslaved ape population is just waiting to have their defiance and frustration like channeled through something that can speak and has the will and the ability to lead and articulate a kind of resistance plan. And once again, very similar to the Dr. Hasslein character, he is just speeding up that process by killing, Caesar is really like, he's kind of like, I'm keeping my head down until he sees the corpse of Armando having killed himself to protect him. And then you can see him you can see Roddy McDowall just tearfully looking at the circus flyer and then being like, it is time to, actually resist. And I love his act of defiance when Breck is he opens up a history book. He's like, you can pick your name. And he points to Caesar. He's like, Caesar,
so sick.
A king.
Oh my God. And there's a long, I love that it's just a long beat and that it's only interrupted by someone else being like, oh, you have to go into this other room now, Breck.
Right.
And where you just get this feeling oh, if this person hadn't interrupted at this very moment, some shit would have completely gone down. It's such a good moment. I love when Caesar starts to kind of amass his power. I love also that this his thing where these apes, the way that the society works, when they go on errands, they get these little red slips that they have what they have to get there because they can't speak, so their owners write these little slips or whatever, and they have Caesar has this whole setup where apes are bringing him their red slips and he's adding stuff to it. And it's it's kind of funny, but it's also such another great thing of just how disconnected this society is and how these people are all just living in the most evil world of all time and just sitting back where it's if an ape comes to the store and brings a slip that says, my owner wants a steak and he also wants 3 gallons of kerosene, that they're just here we go. And just it is funny, but it's also so it just everything here, even when it's goofy, I feel just goes into this world building and really just creates such a nightmare.
Oh yeah, that's even when they start to rebel, it starts kind of small, right? They're dumping trash at first. They're doing petty crimes like that, and then it gets to actual theft, and then they get into the underground community that they've created where they are just collecting.
They start amassing arms. Is maybe my favorite detail. They just start grabbing knives and guns and bringing them to the basement.
Yeah, it's
awesome.
incredible. It's incredible, and I love too. At first, I think it's just knives and clubs and things like that, because eventually they get to this specific moment where they have this maneuver and get the guns from the guards, and it's very cool. But yeah, just to see everything escalate and their rebellion is awesome.
Oh yeah, eventually upgrading to arsons and property damage, because he actually is sending the message. He wants the governor to be like, wow, there's been a noted increase in acts of ape disobedience. And he's like, dude, we're fucking coming for you.
Yeah.
You don't understand. I am organizing a prison escape, slave revolt, essentially. And Breck eventually obviously discovering that he might be their talking ape that they're looking for via an import report, by the way, which is, again, Paul Den is just, he's so good at throwing in just these details that you don't think are going to matter. Yeah. And then they actually do. They're just, these movies are, for being pulpy science fiction movies, are just better written than they probably need to be. And I love that the way that Breck figures out, even as this cartoon fascist character, it's dude, we had an import report that showed an extra chimp coming in from an orangutan shipment that he snuck onto, which is a scene that we actually watched happen as, Caesar
there are no chimps
sneaks
in
by a guard. Yeah, what the fuck? That doesn't make any sense. And so then it's up to McDonald to kind of actually help Caesar escape capture in what looks legitimately essentially the Star Wars hallways, the actual tube tunnels. I was I don't know where these are. These might be one of the few production designed sequences in the movie. And McDonald actually hears through his pitch about for revolution and freedom, and that they are going to force humans to be kind via power. How else can we achieve that?
Yeah.
They're laying in a little bit of the foreshadowing.
Is is it the assistant that he talks to when he says he tells him, he's like, I'm the one that they're looking for, and then the assistant responds with, I thought you were a myth. And so it almost implies that it almost implies that this whole this kind of this conspiracy that the governor believes that could happen from the uprising of the apes, he thought is almost hysterical.
He thinks it's a ridiculous fascist story.
Yeah.
You know, the same way that the guy has been talking about everything.
Yeah.
You know, why would he believe that?
So
but what he believes the official report that the baby was fucking dirty Harry by Eric Braeden.
Right. We all saw it. Yeah, absolutely.
But yeah, as soon as he realizes who Caesar is, obviously he's incredibly sympathetic, and he does try to help him escape. Although it does, it takes a little bit, and it does result in this really creepy little nighttime chase where Caesar runs from like the military police alongside like that exterior bridge, and surrounded by just these concrete and glass like skyscrapers. And he's eventually captured underneath that bridge and then taken to one of the torture facilities where he is tortured into talking via the electrocution device that's like strapped on his head while he's like pinned to a slab. And when they find out that he can talk, he's then like, well, okay, well now he needs to be, executed.
I think it's really,
we're gonna.
It's kind of sad too, the way that this this exposing of him being a talking ape happens, because in the other movies, like it's more of a It's a stronger moment just in the sense of the position that the character's in when he says it. And in this one, he says, have pity, because they're just fucking destroying him with electric shock
torturing
therapy.
him.
Yeah. And so it's just it's a sad moment just because he's a very powerful character, and we're seeing him be completely stripped of that. And in such an iconic moment that is, kind of formulaic in these films, at least. Like we're expecting some moment like that. And we kind of had it in the beginning with the lousy human bastard thing, but it's just undermined because you don't have everyone recognize him saying it. And this is the time that they recognize him speaking.
Yeah, he's not revealing that he can talk on his own terms the way that like Zira did when she was like, I loathe bananas.
Exactly. Exactly.
And But luckily, McDonald secretly does mess with the power breaker before they try to execute Caesar. And Caesar, he fakes his own death in that moment. And he's like, and it is time. We are now going to lead an entire, organized basement ape mob to fight back against the facility guards in this huge ensemble storming prison escape set piece, which is like one of the first of many very, I think, well done action set pieces that were, obviously something that the studio kind of mandated, because they were like, yeah, we think Escape kind of underperformed because it didn't really play as much for like maybe kids who wanted to see an action movie. And it's so funny that they were like, we gave that to you, but we hired J. Lee Thompson, who made like fucking war movies and horror movies and thrillers. And so you have like an undercurrent of this action is not particularly pleasant, and it's not actually like that. I mean, it is fun to watch because I'm a sick freak, but it's just like, it's like, this is like, even the ape management facility storming, 100%, you're like, dude, these guards deserve to die. And even then you're still like, holy fuck, they're kicking and leaping, strangling them with whips. There's gunshots so that they fall from like the second story balcony. I mean, obviously there's the iconic like crazy fucking walking fireball stunt they do when that ape sneaks behind that guard and just flamethrowers him. They're like, dude, you were trying to scare us with the flamethrower. Now we're just going to actually flamethrower you, and just mass murdering guards left and right, taking complete control of that concrete fortress.
I gotta say too, just talking on the stunt work, like you already mentioned the ledges and people falling over them in the second stories and stuff. It's awesome. That tackle of the flamethrower guy is crazy because the flame is out and he's got like he's on the trigger and everything, and then the guy just tackles him. The flame goes up in the air and everything. It just seems very risky because the flame would be kind of uncontrolled. And I thought that one shot was awesome.
Yeah, anytime that a movie has real fire in it, I'm on board. I'm there. I'm fully seated.
You used to be able to go to the movies and a guy would be on fire.
I know.
And you'd be like, wow, look at that guy on fire. That's a guy on fire.
Increases the enjoyment factor of any movie by like 50%. It makes a good movie. It makes a good movie.
Yeah, exactly.
Yep.
Tarantino understood that need at the end of Once Upon a Time in Hollywood. More flamethrowers, everyone.
He likes doing that one. But it's so funny too, because you think that like this is the big set piece they saved up their money for, and you're like, oh wait, no, this is the rest of the movie.
Yeah. Oh yeah. That was the thing.
That was my shock the first time that I watched it. I was like, oh no, wait, the rest. Wait, I was like, how long is it? It's like 30 minutes. I was like, the rest of this movie is just a series of chaotic and claustrophobic, like bloody battle sequences shot in just like this handheld, like riot footage style, and it is just like. It's pretty spectacular stuff. Again, considering the fact that he had no money, and it's like it's shot in such a stylized way that really emphasizes the shadows and the architecture and the fire
and just the brutality.
Like them stomping on people and blood coming out of their faces, and you're just like, holy
I think
fuck.
the scariest images for me were when like you'd get the guards, like there'd be 3 guards or something, and they get surrounded because the guards have guns, so they try to like take them on by numbers. And so at a certain point, you'd have like 50 chimpanzees with knives just stabbing at 3 guards, and it terrified me. Like I'm like, this is wild. Just the power.
No, dude, that's fine. I could handle that situation.
It's crazy, man. I mean, the strength of 50 chimpanzees alone, but now they're holding cleavers and bats and whatever
and just charging through the fucking shadows, and at one point dumping kerosene around so that they actually like create this line of fire that they're then like leaping through to attack these like armed riot control like military police guys.
Dude,
it's
the
crazy.
wide shot of them, like, and again, this is like 50 to 100 extras in monkey suits, just doing the monkey walk and run around and just dumping kerosene in that one line wide shot is amazing. I was so on board. I mean, I was on board throughout the whole film, to be honest, but just this finale is. It is kind of what you're waiting for. You know what I mean? You see Caesar react to all this. You're like, here it comes, the revolution.
Well, what I think it is, I think it just is. I think it's the best sense of mood that any of these films has had since the first one.
Totally.
Because it is something simple as just like the suspense tension of like watching an ape dump carrot. You're like, why is he doing that?
Yeah.
Like, what are they going to do with that? You know, and there's an anticipation to eventually building up to these really gruesomely cathartic sequences of them just full on ape versus fascist cop violence.
Yep.
And it is wild. Like you see, like when the apes get shot, it's like blood splurting out of their masks and stuff like that. And when you see the aftermath shots, it's just like ape corpses lying all over the ground. And, you know, at one point Caesar orchestrates, he sacrifices all of these charging apes so that they can orchestrate a tactic where they net all of these guards and then start shanking them all inside the netting while they're screaming and shit. You're like, holy fuck.
And that's how they can finally get guns, because it's kind of this, it just expands as it goes. They get better weapons, more apes show up, more guards show up, so that there's just a bigger battle in each kind of segment of this sequence. It's awesome.
Just
murking
cops left and right, stepping on them, hurling them, charging them even while they're being shot at, and just hoping that they're going to overwhelm them with numbers. And it's crazy.
At a certain point, my notes were just, it's a brawl. Apes they keep going. More brawling. So many ape extras.
Heads being bashed in with chains. You know, they're strangling them, throwing them through glass windows.
It's so wild. Satisfying too. I mean, you can just like, I feel like from the first like 30 seconds of this movie, you're like, oh, it better end. It better end like this, and then it does.
Yeah,
it's great.
Yeah, they totally set it up from the first frame. You're like, well, this is evil. I hope these apes like get revenge for this at some point. And then it's like, here we go. There's the entire, and it's again, I just kind of surprised at how well directed it was by J. Lee Thompson. There's one shot in particular I wanted to highlight, which is the one of Caesar charging through the smoke and fire on this like dolly, like side scrolling thing that he's doing, where he's like literally like firing the rifles at them, and it's literally following him through all of the various environmental destruction and carnage that he's unleashed, and eventually builds to a sequence that is another, talk about fucking Star Wars thing, but where they cut their way into Breck's stronghold, but it's like Qui-Gon and Obi-Wan and Phantom Menace like whipping out like welding their way through, or
and then they're doing full on, like there's one guy in that communications room that gets sent through the electronic computerized table, and it's a full explosion. Like it's fucking wild. They really jump it up a notch.
It looks great. That last when Caesar is giving that incredible final speech, and it's like the flames behind him, and my god! And also, I just like when he gets the rifle. I feel like they do such a good job too of like the earlier kind of like stockpiling thing is like, okay, they have knives, they have they have a butcher's knife, they have an axe or whatever. Oh, now they have this like weird little tea strainer, I guess, that one Abe brought. And then it's like when he finally gets the gun, you're like, fuck, like this is it.
Yeah,
this is happening. Like he looks so fucking cool toting that gun around.
Yeah, and
it's crazy.
And too, because I think the governor straight up says when he realizes that they have the guns, he's like, if we lose this battle, it'll be the end of the world as we know it. And he's very much correct.
Yeah.
Very
oh,
right
dude, and not only
and
that,
also,
he gives you the Rick Dalton moment of the world will belong to a planet of apes.
Yeah.
And you're like, there it is.
The
full circle.
The apes getting like the assault rifles too is also great because I feel like that's the point when it starts to like feel very like real too. Like that's such a good grounding element of like, you're watching a sci-fi movie where it's about a dystopian society where the world descended into fascist slave owning because all the dogs and cats died. And you're watching like apes run around with knives and stuff and flamethrowers.
I should say, by the way, is that the funniest reason that we possibly started like
it's
a slave?
So funny too that they
we
were
like, dude, we were done with slavery. We all agreed it was kind of bad, but then the cats and dogs died, and we said, you know what?
Right back to that.
We're bringing it back.
Even if Caesar is like, why couldn't you just let us be pets? It's like he wanted to be.
Yes, that is something that he says. That is so funny.
Yeah. But like, but anyway, just you're watching.
He has a very creepy response to that, by the way, where he's like, "Because your kind was once our ancestors, and on some some deep sick level, you are the beast within us that we want to whip into submission.
Honestly,
you taint us, Caesar. You poison us.
Honestly,
we're hating the dark side of ourselves.
Like,
it's fucked up.
End of movie hero villain exchange. I feel like you see so many of those like sleepwalking screenwriters doing like, we're not so different, you and I, or whatever. And this one just fully hits on all cylinders. Like it's, it's so great.
Too, it's like, because we were mentioning that he's just kind of this full-on evil guy, and you don't see a lot of the fear. That is a nice moment for his character, where it kind of does reveal his motivation and more of a human
his
side.
Psychotic ideology makes sense if you believe what he's saying in that moment.
Yeah, exactly. It's a little bit, he exposes himself for the first time, it seems like, in that sense.
Yeah.
Well, and then Caesar literally has him taken outside to be publicly executed in a bloody pile of just dead cops that are all just being beaten and shanked and screaming, and the image is fucking brutal. And at that point, even McDonald is kind of like, Caesar, this is pretty wild, man, and I love that they introduce him as like the guy who's sympathetic because of his own sort of ancestors' experiences. And then he kind of goes, dude, you're killing cops pretty crazy though, like this is, I think at one point he's like, hate just brings more violence, man. Like who's by what right are you spilling all of this blood? And he's like, by the slave's right to punish his persecutor. And he's like, I, a descendant of slaves, am asking you to show humanity. And this is maybe the craziest section of the movie, because I'm assuming both of you watched the unrated cut, right? The director's cut. I think that's
I think I watched, because I watched the one that's on Disney Plus, and I'm almost certain, based on the details that I'm reading, that I think I watched the original theatrical cut. Or not the original, but whatever the one was that they revamped or whatever.
Yeah, I watched the one where it was reshot, I believe.
Well, we can probably answer it here. Okay. So does the governor die or not?
The governor gets fucking murked in my version.
He does not get murked.
He does not get murked in my version. Yeah.
Which is very disappointing.
Okay.
Which still, it is. It's definitely disappointing. It still, for me, I guess, works. Just given that you can kind of see, you want Caesar to at least still have some of the humanity left. It's just that they also make this guy so fucking evil that, he kind of, on a cinematic level especially, deserves death. So it gets a little complicated there, but I understand what they're going for with the, there's a woman a chimpanzee that says no, and it's like the first, it's the first time that they're speaking that isn't Caesar, and so he kind of takes. There's an emotional connection there where it's like there's so much violence going on that the first thing that she says is stop this violence in some capacity. So I think that part of it really works. But I could see the satisfaction in the governor being killed. So yeah,
I was very disappointed by the ending, and I was very, glad on one level to learn that yes, the people who made this knew how it needed to end, and also on another level, very disappointed.
Yeah, well, and not only that, if you guys want to hear the crazy story on how this happened, because obviously the bleak ending just tested poorly, and they redid it, but they didn't have the money to redo it. So they actually had to just rejigger it in post, essentially, because what happens in the version that they originally shot and is available to watch as the unrated or director's cut is Caesar violently ranting about, and I think he starts this way in the version you guys would have watched, where he's talking about, where there's fire, there's smoke, and from this day forward, my people will crouch and conspire and plot, and we will bring about man's downfall. When the sea is a dead sea and the land is a wasteland, I will lead my people from their captivity, and we shall found our own armies and religion and dynasty, and that this day is upon you. We are going to persecute and destroy humankind. And all the apes with guns are obviously listening to this speech, waiting for the order to do it. And in the original version that they scripted and that they shot, they do just follow his orders, and he triggers his guerrilla comrades to just start beating Breck to absolute death. And it is straight up they are taking the butt of the guns and bashing his head. Yeah. And you do actually see just over and over again, brutally mauling him. And you do get some sort of quick splices of, the bloody sort of cop corpses and stuff like that in the pile of all of them, because the unrated cut also restores some of the gruesomeness that was cut out for the theatrical cut that they ended up putting out. But the final shot is essentially, sort of the apes howling and the guns descending upon the fucking guy, the governor's fucking skull, and Caesar just looking out into the night, and you get that big zoom in on his face, and you get the fiery sort of night in the background. You get the foreground of still seeing guns just being fucking bashing, and you just get Caesar witnessing this kind of unhinged brutality that he's unleashed. And it ends in a little bit of an ambiguous moment where you do go, you're curious how Caesar feels about it, or whether he's completed his transition, or whether he thinks that he's maybe unleashed something that's very brutal. You're not exactly sure, but that's the moment where it kind of cuts to black. And for the theatrical cut, they added they had Roddy McDowell come in and add that whole extra part of the speech that he gives about, we will put away our hatred now, and we will put down our weapons, and we can afford to be humane. We can back down from this, and we're still going to have our Planet of the Apes, but we're going to be kind about it. And they literally took the footage that existed of the cut that they shot, and they reversed it to make it look like the guys listen to him and actually bring their guns back and but they had to reverse the footage to pull it off, because the actual footage is them fucking bashing him to death.
Well, I have heard that it reverses. It's strange though, because with the edit that I guess me and Cameron saw, essentially what it does is it kind of makes it a tension-filled moment. It's built-in suspense. So he's commanding it, and then they raise the guns, and they're about to do it. And Caesar isn't the one that calls it off. It's the girl that I was mentioning that says no, and that's the first time she's ever talked, and the first time any other ape has talked. So I guess, so to me, it's still, I get trust me, my inner demon wants that fucking guy to just be crushed and to see it. And I'm going to go out and watch that original ending, because I do want to see it in its context. But for me, this still worked, just given that it's kind of it was this prophecy that's being fulfilled based on the fear of the governor, where he's if we let them have this power, they're going to do the same to us, or if not worse, all this violence. So when he's showing,
but they wanted to keep Caesar's character intact as well while they were doing it.
Yeah, and to be honest, when you told said the thing where he beats the living shit out of the governor, and then after he's like, okay, now we have room to be humane. That to me is hilarious, honestly. That almost undercuts that line in a strange way. Not that I think...
Oh, no. Well, I'm saying none of that exists in the unrated cut.
Oh, I see what you're saying. I misunderstood. I thought you said that he beats him and then after he's like...
No. That was all... That whole section of the speeches only exists in the theatrical cut. In the unrated one, he literally just like gives them the go-ahead to beat him to death. Burns. And the rest of the movie is them just beating him to death and Caesar watching.
Okay, got you. Because, yeah, I don't know. Do they have the shot of the city burning, or at least the tower that the prison is in burning in the background at the end? Is that in there?
You see it in the background, but I don't think there's like a cut to a wide shot of it. The shot is really focused on Caesar. It's like this big zoom on Caesar seeing in the foreground the bashing happening and just like overseeing what it is that's happening, like completing his sort of transition from, this very scared and abused chimp to a rousing public execution ordering like political leader. It's almost like this like stoic shot of the fire behind him and him observing what he's done.
Okay, that ambiguous nature of it then makes that I like that a lot more. I misunderstood you, and I thought that he undermined it by saying we're humane as well. I'm like, dude, you just fucking destroyed that guy's face. But okay, that makes sense.
They leave it a little ambiguous, and I imagine at the time, because no other film had this issue where like the ending was too bleak, that it tested poorly. I have to imagine it was just because the movie was kind of saying, you know what, these slaves are actually pretty correct.
Revolution is
to just kill a bunch of cops. And they were like, well, I don't know, maybe the studio got cold feet about sending that actual message in the text of the movie. But I mean, that's a thing they should have addressed in the script maybe process.
Yeah. Do they have the woman chimp saying no still in the...
They don't.
Oh, interesting. I think that would have been a cool addition to still have kind of a fight back.
But Caesar says, "Yeah, fuck you. We're still going to do it, though."
I think that would have been a really cool, because then you'd have kind of both ideas there. But I need to see this original, because the ambiguous nature of it could still be built in there. So,
I mean, I really, really wish that I had seen the original ending. I feel like I would have, not that I didn't like this movie, I loved it, but I feel like I would have liked it so much more. And I think, especially in the 70s, what a daring, insane fucking way to end a movie. I think that's just it's incredible. It's crazy. I really can't believe that they did this. It's like it is like. It really, I think this is I think that the ending to the original Planet of the Apes is probably one of the best movie endings of all time. I think it would easily crack top 10 for me. And this one, I feel like, comes close. It's just fucking crazy. And it's also just such an interesting and great way to like take, these movies obviously have always been kind of political and like interested in examining stuff like this, but I feel like they can be a little goofy and a little silly about it. And this one is like really grounded and really like, and I think it's also kind of the first one that takes the bleak, nihilistic ending that we're used to from this series and kind of weaponizes it a little bit and turns it into something that really actually means something beyond just like, isn't that fucked up? Look what happened. That sucks, man. Damn. Like this one is like, you watch it and you are thinking about real life and you're thinking, oh, fuck. Oh, shit. This is crazy. Like maybe this, what does revolution mean? Is this okay? Is this what's supposed to happen? Is this what's going to happen? Should this happen? And especially, in this time period when people are, it's crazy.
Yeah, they were having those conversations.
Yeah, having these conversations, seeing this stuff on the news. Like it looks like riot footage. Like it's shot like riot footage.
No, they're deliberately like in terms of imagery, like, they want you to make it to associate it with like civil rights, like riots, which is maybe its own, kind of issue. Maybe doing that with like silly ape costumes would upset people. I'm not sure how people feel about that. But it is like deliberately trying to create a, militarized police state political world and saying this is an evil thing that needs to be violently kind of overthrown. And obviously it has some, feelings about that where it does kind of depict the ape uprising as still very brutal and still very
as
disturbing,
brutal, but also
to watch.
as righteous. I think that's what sets it apart so much. Is I think this stuff, I know
it's fueled by anger and righteous anger for sure.
It might map like messily onto the real world, and a lot of it is goofy, and it is rubber costumes and makeup and whatever. And again, we're talking about it. This whole thing is caused because dogs and cats died, but it really is. I don't know. Like, I can't think of that many movies that I've seen that are really positing like this is a violent revolution, that they're killing a lot of people and they're choosing this, and this is the hero of the movie. And it's a little bleak, but you can understand what's happening, and you're meant to be siding with the people who are revolting here.
You believe in its justification for sure.
It's crazy that this is the fourth Planet of the Apes movie. Yeah. And it's doing that.
I am shocked by this series. I had not watched the franchise. I honestly wrote it off. I thought the sequels were just going to be I just thought they were going to be shit, honestly. I thought they were going to be just money grabbing kind of production
stuff.
Yes, and this was the last thing I expected, especially from the fourth entry. So totally agree.
Especially after Escape. Oh my God. Not that Escape didn't have its own stuff going on and its own stuff on its mind, but this is I think this one is insane.
Yeah, it's
really
like
something special.
The ending of Escape just sets it up so this had to be the tone of the fourth one. They're like, how do we just shot a chimp baby and showed it all, so now we have to show the revolution. We have to see an uprising of sorts. I think it's awesome.
Yeah, these movies are fucking insane.
They're insane.
I mean, we've been saying this since we talked about the fucking first one, and we've now done 2 full weeks. We've been nothing but talking about 8 movies on this show, 4 in a row.
Ape Fever, baby.
Ape Fever. But I mean, if this is where we're going to maybe pivot towards the reductive rating round, this one's this is the strongest for me of all of the sequels. I think that this is the best one, other than the first one for me. Again, I think the retro Orwellian sort of sci-fi vision of an alternate 90s where all cats and dogs died and apes are now pets and slave labor is very silly and surreal, but it's considering the budget slashing that was being done, it's very vividly realized. It's very tangibly realized. And eventually, obviously, turns into a full, vicious and bloody, we didn't bring his name up, but this almost reminded me of George Romero movie.
Sure, totally.
In terms of just the scorching rage that those apes, I was thinking about something like Day of the Dead or The Crazies, or, this full uprising against mankind and for imprisoning and enslaving them. But I think a part of the reason I think this is one of the best one is the very, very skilled direction by J. Lee Thompson, and the cinematography by Bruce Surtees. I think there's a lot of great the nighttime shadowy images, the use of the architecture, the use of the fire. That there's so much fire in this movie, from the flamethrower to the kerosene to the apes fucking jumping through it. If you guys end up watching the unrated cut, I would suggest even watching, not even skipping the ending, watching the whole thing again at some point, because there's also a lot more blood, from what I understand. Straight up, you are seeing shots of when apes get shot in the face, it's the kind of 70s kind of Squidward they used to do, where they just kind of throw a bucket of paint in someone's face. Yeah. That's kind of what it is. So they have that kind of stuff in here. All of the crazy vision of this world as just a psychological torture conditioning prison and a militarized police state combined, that is explicitly pretty fucking evil in its treatment towards the apes, and all of the action footage incorporating riot handheld sequencing and really brutal sort of Nazi imagery for the way that they obviously that the actual humans are dressed and costumed. And I don't know. This was, I think that there's something just crazy about the fact that you can have something with bizarre details that this is an ape slavery dystopia where gorillas are being cattle prodded into being better waiters and being herded with flamethrowers before being auctioned off into to be personal servants. And it's so sort of sadly and angrily realized, the cynicism is, you feel it on a really, really deep level. so that when it changes into the action heavy, like apocalyptic bloodbath stuff, it is incredibly cathartic and righteous. And you do get swept up in it. And it's so well staged and disturbingly shot, like using the history of prison escape movies and sort of military battle set pieces as you're following Roddy McDowall's transition from, this very scared and abused, chimp who becomes this articulate sort of messiah revolutionary who leads military campaigns and orders public executions and actually articulates the frustrations and feelings of this entire underclass you watch in the opening of the movie. And I don't know, it's so tense, it's brutal, it's moody, and it really does bring these movies full circle with the kind of violently conservative ape state of the original film. You're like, you get to the end of this movie and you get to what Caesar orders them to do and how he would feel about that. And you wonder, that's all you need. You didn't even need battle to be like, well, that's how we got to the first film. These guys worship this guy who freed them from this horrible situation. And I don't know. I think Paul Dehn, as far as franchise sequel screenwriting, he's gotta be like one of the greatest at doing it. He always picked up in the right spot. He saved himself from all the various holes that they set up. And he just merged, I think, finally with J. Lee Thompson, with a director who could really, really vividly realize some of the harrowing ideas that he was getting at. So I'm very strong for it.
Yeah, I'm also going to give it a 4. This is, I think, my favorite sequel. I think Thompson has a great understanding of action. I love his handheld camera work, not even with the action, but even when, Caesar's being presented with the society that he's going to be dealing with the whole time, like watching all of the enslaved chimps and all of the ones doing hard labor and all of that. It creates this very personal space using the close-ups and the handheld camera work. And I love Caesar's progression as a revolutionary. He just watching him discover all of this is very sad, and you understand, I mean, the anger that's being filled out through this 90 minutes until you finally get to the finale. And it's just, you believe in the revolution and you believe in the violence that's unfortunately required for it to take hold. So I think they do a great job of that. I gotta say, this is one of my favorite prison movies now, which I didn't think, the franchise was going to give me, so that's kind of cool. In moments, it honestly,
dude, Bruce Surtees' Conquest of the Planet of the Apes, Escape from Alcatraz. Come on,
it's killer. It's killer. And
we just needed Clint Eastwood to appear. If these movies lasted long enough, Clint Eastwood would have been.
We needed an Eastwood in the monkey suit. That's what we needed. Yeah. And then I also. The chaos of some of the scenes and when they're fighting in the prison, it did remind me a little bit of specifically in some of the wide shots where you had all the extras going against the guards. Certain moments in like female prisoner Scorpion. Am I mixing up the words in that
701
order?
baby?
Yeah, it's. I mean, it's an amazing movie if you haven't seen it. It does lack, like in this movie, they're not doing that surreal lighting or anything, but it just brings that same kind of chaos and environment. It is cool to see, just given that this is the 4th one and we've heard about the myth, we've heard about the uprising and everything. It's cool to actually see that threat form, and have the humans' fears realized and everything. So it's just awesome to see Caesar at the end give that big speech, and he's, there's flames behind him, and he's like, this is the revolution. Apes everywhere will be doing this by tomorrow. Like, it's exciting. It's awesome. 4 out of 5.
Yeah, I also got to go strong 4 out of 5 for this. I loved it. I thought it was so great. I also can definitely see this increasing for me as especially rewatching. I think the unrated version, I know I will definitely be watching, and I feel like I will like that even more. Great movie. I feel like this is very clearly the most worthy successor to the unbelievably great original. It's just there are parts I couldn't believe what I was watching. It was awesome.
Yeah, truly.
That's what you want to hear when you're queuing up a Planet of the Apes movie. Especially I cannot believe my eyes. What the fuck is happening? how is this a real franchise?
Yeah.
How did how was it a huge commercial hit franchise? People in the 1970s
so
were just
dark.
like stoked every time, dude, I'm going to go watch a bunch of guys in rubber suits and with crazy makeup on, and then I'm going to get bummed out.
Yeah, for real. It's like, let's just go watch
my weekend plans.
Human beings being taken over the entire planet. This is fucking awesome. Let's go. It's great. They had a good attitude, I guess.
Yeah. I would also recommend continuing on and going into Battle. Unfortunately, Battle is the one that kind of like ruins the bleak ending a-thon.
Really?
It actually ends on a little bit more. I mean, it does have a place it could have ended where it would have been pretty bleak. It's very similar to, for anyone who's seen Dawn, there is a very similar like Caesar and Koba relationship in this, and it does end similarly. But they do also end up kind of having this coda at the end where John Huston is fucking in an ape costume as the lawgiver. They make John Huston the lawgiver, which is incredible. And they do kind of suggest that, you know, there is hope at some point, maybe down the line for apes and humans to get along. And if you just want to check it out just to see where the ape never kills ape laws come from, and to also see Paul Williams from Phantom of the Paradise. He is the Dr. Zaius type orangutan.
Really? That's great.
Yeah, in Battle for the Planet of the Apes. And I've never seen a guy who was more suited to playing like have that
Dr.
orangutan makeup. Like, yeah, he actually you didn't need to do much work
He already looks
to
like Zaius,
Paul Williams. Yeah.
That's so funny.
So there's a lot of fun to be had there. And I heard there's a TV show, so now I'm going to have to check out a TV show too.
Yeah.
So there's all kinds of Planet of the Apes out there to
Or Cornelius.
enjoy. But I think that is going to... Yes, that is going to wrap it up, I think, for this week. That was Escape from the Planet of the Apes from 1971 and Conquest of the Planet of the Apes from 1972. Thanks so much, Cameron, for joining us and for going ape mode.
Yeah, no problem. Always
with
happy
us here.
Always happy to go any mode.
Hey, what's going on with Podcast About List? What are you guys doing? You got any live things to promote?
Yeah. When does this come out? Is this anyway? I guess
this will come out oh my god, when does it come out? The 18th.
Okay.
Yeah.
Well, if you're listening to this on the day that it comes out and you're in Philadelphia, we're doing a live sketch show that the pre-sale sold out. But
That's
there
a
are tickets at the
super
door.
specific audience member, but I bet you, but it could work.
I hope
happen.
one person comes
Probably-
up to you and says that that's what happened. At least.
Probably not a useful plug to make, but make it anyway, 'cause that's what we got going on.
Yeah.
Please do it though. If whoever you are out there, you listen to this, you're in Philly, you discovered the show
Yes.
via that, please tell Cameron.
Yeah, please do. And I'll say this too, I guess, something that we do on our Twitch channel, me and my friend Julio, who runs our Twitch channel, every Monday we watch a movie on Twitch, we watch very, very bad movies that maybe some Sleazoids fans would have some interest in. But I will say these are movies a lot of them are, I think, magnitudes lower budget than what you guys are covering. We have, I would say, like we watch some, we do a bunch of Eric Roberts.
I mean,
stuff.
hey, we just
watch
had
some
Charles Pinion on
David
last
Dakota
week,
stuff.
who literally made
I guess when
zero
I say lower
budget films.
I mean maybe orders of magnitude worse too. These are slop. These are not
okay.
Well,
hey, do you know what?
I would say
David Dakota. We've talked David
that's
Dakota.
what I'm saying. I'm saying David
times.
Dakota might be our high
liked-
water mark.
Okay, gotcha. Hell yeah.
Okay.
That's awesome.
I see what you're saying.
We're really in it. We're doing a month of Doug Campbell Lifetime movies right now. I don't know if you guys have watched Stalked by My Doctor. Highly recommend Stalked by My Doctor.
It's Doug
Fucking
Campbell.
crazy.
I have not, but I have heard.
Movie
Doug
series
Campbell-
about Eric Roberts playing a guy who's a doctor who's obsessed with young female patients, and he has like multiple like imaginary personas that appear to him and talk to him. Great.
Is
Oh my God.
Doug Campbell the YouTuber? Am I getting that right? Am I
don't-
thinking of somebody else?
I think you might be thinking of somebody
There are
else. This is a
different
guy
Doug,
who's
Josh,
directed
that-
like 50 sleazy Lifetime movies.
Oh, okay. Is there a...
Yeah, isn't there how many Stalked by My Doctors are there now? Isn't there like 4?
There's 5.
or-
And I'm
There's
got my
5,
fingers
Jesus
crossed
Christ.
for a 6th one. But anyway, every Monday night we don't have a specific time we do it at, so this is also a bad plug. But if you're interested in that kind of thing, we do it on twitch.tv/podcastaboutList. It's very fun.
Sweet.
Oh yeah, check it out. I'm gonna have to tune in at some point.
Yeah, that'd be fun.
But yeah, for our listeners, we're gonna be back in 1 week's time. Where, as Jamie alluded to, we are going to be going warrior mode, specifically because similarly to there being a new Planet of the Apes movie. For the first time since we started the show in 2018, there is also the first Mad Max movie since the first time we started.
I forgot that was coming out.
Since we started the show.
Yeah.
That's right, baby. So it comes out next week by the time people are listening to this. So next week we are going to be talking about The Road Warrior because we somehow haven't covered it. We've only ever covered the first Mad Max. So we're finally going to be talking about The Road Warrior. And we got a little bit lazy with the pairing. We're like, well, we haven't done it yet. Might as well. We're in a bit of we're trying to get some classics out of the way. We're going to talk about The Warriors by Walter Hill. We're going to talk about some post-apocalyptic guys in great outfits beating the shit out of each other. That's going to be next week.
Love it.
That's right. Patreon.com/Sleazoids podcast next week for anyone who's interested in that. And then in 2 weeks' time, we're going to be back with a special guest where we are going to be doing, I think maybe the first time we've ever done an episode inspired by maybe the connection is a musician. We're going to be doing some movies based around Bruce Springsteen, who didn't actually have like a crazy movie career or anything, but we're going to be talking about a movie called True Confessions, which apparently is the movie that most inspired Nebraska. A lot of people like to say it's Badlands, and I think that there is something there, but I guess True Confessions is the one where there's actually, like, he might have even cited it as like the movie that he watched that made him write that album or something. We're going to get the full story from the guest who's an expert on this stuff, but we're talking True Confessions, and then also a Paul Schrader movie that most people don't know about that I actually think is pretty good called Light of Day, which is his Ohio like working class rocker movie with Michael J. Fox and why am I blanking on her name right now? This is going to be so embarrassing. I'm going to have to pull it up so that Jamie can can cut this. Joan Jett. That's sweet. Who it is. It's Joan Jett is the sister, and Gina Rowlands is their mother. Hell yeah. It's a really, really strange movie, but it was originally called Born in the USA, and it was written for Bruce Springsteen, and Bruce Springsteen stole the name from the script for the song.
Really?
And the album. It's such a crazy... Paul Schrader wrote Born in the USA.
That's crazy.
Some people don't know this, but we're going to talk about that in 2 weeks' time with a special guest who knows all about this stuff. So
love going Schrader mode.
Any of that? Check it out. But yeah, that's going to wrap it up for everything this week. Thanks so much for listening, and keep it sleazy.
Keep it sleazy, everybody.